Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the War Report. Now, believe it or not, it's been about I think 8 months since I got back from a based world, that being Hungary and Serbia, and actually even Romania, but that last one's debatable. We found Geo. He is indeed still here. Uh,
I
he,
was in
we,
the winds.
we did not isolate him. We did not drive him off the program. He's still here. Don't worry. I know you guys have been asking for it for a while. I've been making empty promises that we would get him on for a while, but we are finally here. And we have a lot to cover. It's been just under 2 weeks since the last episode, and a lot has
The
happened
Qatari
since.
check's cleared.
Oh,
The
wonderful.
Qatari check's kicked in.
But, well, maybe for some of us, but I digress. But yeah,
We
it's.
were in the same meeting, I don't think.
Oh, well, that explains a lot. But we're bringing off-show matters, stuff that's supposed to happen behind the scenes on air. That never turns out well. We'll discuss this later, but I will say before we begin anything, I say it before, throughout, and at the end of the program. Give this man your money. You know where to do it. He's got something going on. He'll tell you about it,
Oh
but give
yeah,
this man your money. But
we have a new
GSP
article
Geo,
today.
if either of you have any opening comments, floor is yours.
Well, I know we were talking about like all the Romanian top cities you were raising up, but
One or two.
that's neither here nor there. Um, and the real Romanian, not Roma, Romanian. But
Not Roma.
some of them look good though. I got it. Like that. Did you see that one video of that chick trying to bottle that tourist, and the guy just like wrestled the travel vlogger, just like wrestled her to the ground. She's like, no, no, no. They're cut like, or that other video where like I think it was in Paris in some like random piazza where there's like a whole horde of like Roma
Ugh.
pickpockets. The guy's blasting with like the water gun. Oh my god!
No,
Like it's like a real video game. That's like a CS:GO server.
I will say personal experience. I can't speak for everyone, and I do have two advantages whenever I travel anywhere in that part of the world: is ethnic ambiguity, and I go in off season, so most people don't spot me for a tourist at the start of it. I will say at least when I was in Hungary, I don't believe I encountered a single Roma. And I will say Budapest is actually one of the cleanest cities. Actually, I think the cleanest city I've ever visited in my life. And I know I'm bringing up old stuff. I'm talking about stuff from 8 months ago, but I will say that. So that was impressive. But yeah, otherwise, I think the most encounters I actually had with them were in Italy of all places. But that's
Of course.
yeah, of course. Uh,
Is it true that they cut their pinky finger off so they could like they could like insert into the pocket faster?
I can't say
That was like a
I
lot
can't say I've
ago.
studied their hands close enough or kept up with them close enough, but it's one of those things that it's not unbelievable that I believe at least some of them have done that.
Yeah, it's kind of there. It's I mean, it could just be an old wives. Could just be like an old wives folklore. Like I remember Landshark had this tweet about the origin of the Roma that God permitted them to steal because one of their earliest ancestors stole the fourth nail while they were crucifying Christ.
Oh god, they were everywhere even then.
It's like, no, it's legitimately like a folk story that like the early descendant of the Roma stole the fourth nail intended for Christ, and that's why God allows them to steal.
I
I'm not joking.
no, I've heard this one many times before, and I've told this one to many people. But every time I hear it come out of somebody else's mouth, it's like I believe it, but there's still just that
I
visceral
believe.
reaction that like
Yeah.
no, I don't believe. Like I
When
can
Landshark
rationalize it.
lie to you,
I don't know. We I think GSP we were talking about Bulgarians. I sent you an interesting image about Bulgarians the other day. But I'm not here to
Oh,
I'm not here to potentially alienate any of our audience. So I will hold my comments.
Has
on
there been
Bulgaria.
a color revolution in Bulgaria yet, or no?
I mean,
No.
do they need one?
Do they need one?
They don't need one. That's the long and the short of it. They don't actually need a color. Mission accomplished.
But I will say, as far as
Uh,
tricolors go, I do like the Bulgarian flag.
Yeah, it is
oh
nice.
yeah.
Green. It's unique. I know. I was just talking about Italy and Hungary. They both have it, but in that configuration with that shade of green, you don't see that too often.
No, you don't.
But
I like
I
Bulgarian folk music.
I have a comment that I'm going to hold my tongue on. But
Anyways, what's been going on in the world? Apparently, peace has been achieved. The best peace deal, the greatest.
well, Donald Trump, much like his predecessor Bashar al-Assad, is going to win 1,000 Nobel Peace Prizes.
Yeah, he gave it to
Yeah.
some like lowbie Venezuelan woman. Like that was.
Oh yeah, the female Guaido. What's her name?
Doesn't matter. They crank these people out in like a George Soros factory. I think we were talking about this with Ryan Ruth last week, but they
That
these
was a good episode. I really liked that one last week.
well, I appreciate that. I try sometimes, but it is these kind of people, the Guaidos, the Tinovskaya in Belarus, who actually just got exiled from Lithuania because of territorial claims she made on behalf of Belarus. But these people are all just cranked off an assembly line in a George Soros factory. I think Navalny is probably the prime example of that. But I mean, there's many people like that. Let me find this woman's name while you guys discuss this. I'll see if
Oh,
I can.
speaking of Nobel Peace Prize, you see, won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Speaking of Hungarians, uh, Laszlo, what's his name? Laszlo Krasnoporkai. I'm butchering his name, but he wrote. Didn't he write Satan Tango and then Bellatar direct? Yeah, he wrote Satan Tango, and then Bellatar directed it. I watched all 7 hours of Satan Tango. It was quite an experience.
Really?
Um, yeah, but the thing is, like, I know they like picked him because he's kind of like a boomer lib. Like he's like anti-Orban, and like Obama's like was the god of America. Like it's so funny
It's
because
always
like
sad when you see Europeans accepting like American boomer culture. Like
yeah.
it's
Which is
like
funny because like his post-Soviet writing, like the Turin Horse or like Satan Tango, like it does have a certain form of like communist romanticism, but at the end of the day, like they're like very meaningful works of Slavic culture, the way that Gogol was. But it's just that
mm.
he's, like Orban is a Russia show and all this bullshit. Like yeah, like total like boomer world order type of like American boomer lib world order type of bullshit.
Okay, I found it. It's Maria Corina Machado.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Muchacho.
right.
Yeah. What did she do? Is she
uh,
like
she ran on behalf of Gonzalez, who was like the 89-year-old Guaido, and of course lost the election in Venezuela. Now, whether one wants to say legitimately or not, that I don't think is really relevant to the conversation. It's all color revolution ops. But I mean, hey, color revolution, rainbow. I'm starting to see the connection here, but perhaps it took me too long
you know
to.
what's funny? She ran against Hugo Chavez, and it's very funny how like Chavez, he's sort of like in America, he's like the irony cell, like parapolitics guy, and like she's like the libtard, but then like Maduro's now like the sort of like du jour, like Bernie could still win candidate of choice, but like but she's like a total like Westoid shill,
Oh yeah.
and like. But it's funny because in hindsight, though, even like the political, like even the more like let's say strenuous elements of the political right could be like, yeah, I guess Hugo Chavez was kind of based. Um, but not to say he was based or anything, but like certainly um, being like an opponent of the American like libtard world order, at least the George W. Bush iteration of it, has become like even like right wingers of certain podcast networks could be like, yeah, I guess Hugo Chavez was based. Um, but no, she's like a pure like it's very funny to talk. We could actually, I know, like you're gonna do the. I know we're preventing you from the minutia minute, but let me just say that, like, as a good way we could talk about this later. It does seem that there is a sort of weird and uncomfortable position of like the elite within like transnational progressivism, whereas like Trump is however contained you want him to say he is or whatever, he does like present a different face of it that's very complicated relative to these institutions that work against him and also sort of keep that mandate of like global Obama core world 2010 world
Ugh.
forever, to which like the Nobel Prize is an extension of it, hence why they gave it to her instead of like
Yeah.
Trump making these like huge loud noises about, well, I ended the war in Gaza,
He
I
ended the
like broke a
Albanian
peace.
Azeri war. It's the most important
Yeah,
thing, okay?
yeah,
He said that twice too.
yeah.
But my favorite was Zelensky. There was a political article that came out on the 9th, just yesterday, where he said, "This is hilarious. We will nominate Trump if he gives us Tomahawk missiles." But he had a second condition, and that was if he achieves a ceasefire.
Yeah.
Well, you see,
No, but that's what I mean. Like, she's like clearly a creature of like transnational progressivism, whereas like nominating Trump for the Peace Prize would be like the sort of like base MAGA chud option. But it's like still a very interesting development in the face of like the Western transnational progressive elite. And it's like she's like putting her up there is sort of like the Nobel Peace Prize committee, and same with Laszlo winning the prize in literature before like someone like Cormac McCarthy or whoever, is like a way of saying like you know woke neoliberalism is like still the predominant ideology, and it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
matter
yeah.
if Trump. Anyways, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I will say that I am glad Donald Trump did not win the Nobel Peace Prize for one reason, and that is we would have a slew of Albanians naming their child Donald Trump. You'd have Tony Blair, the first son. Bill Clinton is the second son. Donald Trump would be the distant third son.
They actually
Holy
did that.
shit.
Oh my god.
So we've been spared something far worse, I will say. I'm not normally
Yeah.
this optimistic, but that is one point I will make.
Well, Trump on his Truth Social did post that the woman who won the Nobel Prize. I mean, I honestly think that Trump, just to um, maybe expand on your point, Gio. I think he's comfortable being kind of like a martyr for this order in some ways, right? Like, uh, let me explain. When what was it, the Botswana or one of those one of the African countries that legalized gay marriage? Remember Charlie
Botswana.
Kirk was
Yeah.
Yeah,
Botswana.
Botswana.
Charlie Kirk tweeted like, "Oh, this is amazing."
Boom.
Boom. That's right. Boom. There, America did it. I love Jesus. We made gay marriage legal in Botswana. It's so fucking stupid. Like you don't even know where to begin. But I think he enjoys pretending to be this thing that's going to completely upset the apple cart, but he never really does. And he's willing to be this apparent right-wing martyr, um I think he understands that role, and I think he's okay with it. I do. I don't. I think he's very determined. He loves being president, and I don't. He's people say he's soft. He probably is, but I get the feeling that he doesn't worry all that much about public opinion. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because when he complains about the way he's been mistreated and misrepresented, it's all tactical. Like it's just for his base. Like I don't think he really cares. I could be wrong. I mean, I think he always wanted to be president, especially after Obama said he would never be president and so on. So there is some rivalry, but I think he's changed as well. But yeah, so well, at least Zelensky kind of supported him.
Very generous of Zelensky, not
Giving
only
tomahawks.
to take him off of Mirotrovic, but then nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Given the contingencies, I understand that, but it was still very generous of him to do such a 180 in a less than 12-month period.
That's right. Oh my God. Yeah. Trump was on the minutes. The whole thing is so upside down. Like, yeah, that's right. Trump is gonna be on a kill list with Scott Ritter. Like
Probably us.
probably us. I worry about us, not them. It's such an upside down world, but this is what I mean. I mean, I think that speaks to what I'm trying to explain here. It's like, okay, I guess I'm on this death list, this hit list, or whatever, and yeah, like here's this stupid proxy country that's like can't survive unless it receives hundreds of billions of dollars a year, because there's nothing that can sustain it. Anyways, did you guys want to get to the frontline news?
Yeah, if you have everything
Oh,
ready, I
something
have.
about Ukrainian gas being wiped out.
Yeah, so
targeted
Bloomberg had an
strikes?
article about that yesterday.
Yeah.
I'll read it, bits of it briefly. So, in recent days, Russia has destroyed 60% of Ukraine's production with strikes on Kharkov and Poltava regions, Bloomberg citing sources. This will likely force Kiev to spend 1.9 billion euros to import 4.4 billion cubic meters of fuel by the end of March, about 20% of annual consumption. After these attacks, Ukraine asked partners for urgent provision of equipment to repair the energy system. Now, Kiev, the left bank of the Kiev, for a second night, it hasn't been repaired, is in the dark. This has also happened to some other Ukrainian cities as well, but Kiev is the one that stands out. It's the largest city.
Right as we were
After these
starting,
attacks,
Odessa was actually under attack, and I believe
yes,
they did hit
that
the power facilities there as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so both sides have been hitting each other. Of course, the Ukrainians have made an impact on Russian gas, um, developing stations and exports and whatnot. But again, Russia has more firepower, and so Russia's been more efficient at destroying Ukrainian energy security, through these retaliatory strikes. And the other thing is they're attacking railroad stations now. Now, back in about 3 weeks ago in September, the Russians took out a train that was apparently had military equipment and personnel on it. The thing is, you don't see Russia doing a lot of this. Or, like, I remember in the first year, there was a train that they attacked. Yes. And I never saw another one after that. But here we have it. And so Russia, on top of destroying energy hubs, they've also started destroying railroad yards. Now, these are far away from the front line. You know, um, the one I was talking about, where they took out a train, not a station, but a train. happened near the front line back in 2022. So I mean, a lot of this was provoked because the Ukrainians were very successfully for months hitting Russian fuel depots and Russian refineries for gas and oil all along, like all around, southwestern Russia, right? So I think a lot of this now, like in many ways, the Russians are, destroying bridges, destroying railroad stations. How much of this will matter in the end? I mean, the Ukrainians are complaining that it's getting more difficult for them to ship supplies to their army in the east. So that plays a role to a degree. But people should remember, like there are still ways to get these resources to their army, but it will be more difficult. You know. Um, it- Now the Ukrainians have been hitting places like the Belgorod region. There was an area, maybe not Belgorod city itself, but a town next to it, Stary Oskol. I know that the Russians had one of their Panzer air defense missiles go off trying to hit a Ukrainian drone, and it smashed into an apartment building. So very intense back and forth for several weeks. Um, the Russians are attacking energy infrastructure um, in ways that they haven't done before. They seem to me more determined to destroy not like a substation, but the actual source of the energy, which is something they haven't done before. And I guess this is part of an escalatory strategy that they're employing. But if you want, we can get to a bit into the frontline use. I don't have that many maps, but
I
they
will
are.
add one thing first. I did put it up on the screen. I sent it to you.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, with our group chat, Geo, I don't think can see it. I'll try sending it in this one as well. But this is the
Okay.
vertical gas corridor map. And
Ah.
let me just it's messing up. Sorry, I can't send it, but I'll try actually screen sharing so maybe you can see it. Let's try this. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So with this, we have alternative energy sources. Now, this was being floated towards the beginning of the year, back when Russian gas contracts with Ukraine were expiring at the end of 2024 into the beginning of 2025, as alternative gas routes into Europe. And this was particularly using the ports in Greece. It's not shown on this map, but also the ports in Croatia as well, which is how they're trying to offer a quote unquote alternative to Hungary and Slovakia. But you can see right here, they do have the network to get it from the Balkans into Ukraine. But even with that, it is going to be a nightmare. And that's also on top of the fact that, as we've seen with the recent Russian strikes, they can take out the facilities, the pipelines used to. It sounds counterintuitive as hell, but to actually bring in gas from the European Union, because it's where we're at right now. The European Union's buying third-party Russian gas and also American gas, shipping it in to Ukraine, which needs to import roughly, I think, 2 billion a year. Somebody can correct me if that figure's not quite accurate, but realistically, with the kind of strikes Russia's performing right now, if they want to deploy the, let's just say, metaphorical nuclear option, that is more than an option at this point. Because even with this, and I think this is probably just the best representation, there are other paths, other maps I could pull up, but I'll just use this one for now. They can hit some of the reception sources for the natural gas, and they can completely strangle Ukrainian energy sources. And this was a concern back last winter. People thought that the Russians were going to deploy this option, particularly as leverage
Right.
against Europe, because just like I said, metaphorically nuking the Ukrainian power grid is going to lead to a migrant crisis, probably that Europe hasn't seen since 2015. Now, don't get me wrong, Ukrainians are very different than Middle Easterners, but that still is millions upon millions of people that need to be received in these countries. And most of the countries they're going to are going to be places like Poland, Romania, Slovakia, countries that aren't necessarily as wealthy as Western European countries, and that already struggle to shoulder the burden of the Ukrainian refugees that they have. Let's look at Poland in particular. That has been a very contentious issue, both in terms of economic and social policy in Poland, the issue of the Ukrainian refugees. So this is something that is in the back pocket of the Russians. This is probably one of the strongest bargaining chips they do have. And if the Europeans are going to be this inflexible, and by extension the Americans are going to be this inflexible with negotiations, this is always a move they can pull off. And just I'll reference this map one last time. Look at how convoluted it is versus
Hmm.
what it was before, especially what it was before the war with Russian gas coming straight into Ukraine. Everything has been turned on its head. But with that being said, we can move on to the frontline maps.
Sure. So let's begin
Oh,
in the north with the frontline updates regarding Kupiansk. Now, I say Kupiansk, but the region that we're going to look at first is just it's north of Kupiansk. Of course, it's in the Kharkov region, and this is an area that the Russians have been working on in 2025. Eh, now the orange sector is the sector that the Russians have taken from the Ukrainians. Of course, the large orange that field that you see that the Russians have been building up this area since late 2023 and well into 2024. But the smaller orange field that you see at the top, that just the Russians just took that land a few months ago. And what they're going to try to do is to link these two up. Part of it is to create a buffer with Ukraine, but more importantly, what they want are roads to go into this area once these two sectors are linked together. If I'm not mistaken, in 2022, they were linked until the Ukrainians, with their very successful Kharkov offensive in the fall, in September, pushed the Russians out. Now, you notice that I have like an outline, this sort of boomerang shape. Those are all village settlements. They, in a way, they create like a front line, and there are these villages are all nestled close to one another, stretching over a rather large area. And you can see one of the first anti-tank ditches to the left of it, outlined in yellow, which represents basically the first line of defense. Now we'll move just south of this region into Kupiansk proper. So for people who've been following the show, the Russians have now they've already had a foothold in Kupiansk for some weeks now, even longer than that. Let's say for a few months, but they are now well inside Kupiansk. There were some gains that developed on the 8th and 9th of October. Today is the 10th. And you can see those green, pale green outlines are territories that the Russians took just days prior to the red outline that you see more in the center of Kupiansk. The next slide is a blow up of this region, and the reason being, so there's two areas that have been circled, and the larger one represents apartment complexes. Now, these are always offer great protection for whichever side is defending them. Of course, the Russians leverage these fortresses, as it were, with glide bombs. That's the difference. is that the Russians use glide bombs and the Ukrainians have almost no glide bombs. The second area that's been circled, these are the railroad yards, which also offer a certain amount of protection. Industrial buildings, built to Cold War standards, which, like the apartment buildings, are there to be able to withstand, like, maybe a nuclear war. So you can see that the Russians continue to advance into Kupiansk, and you can see there's an area which is not colored in either the orange or the blue. Now, on the left-hand side, of course, this is an area where the Ukrainians should be able to take care of this narrow salient, but and they have in the past, they have been able at times to push the Russians out. However, in these last few weeks, they haven't been. And what that could be is a telltale sign that the Ukrainians are suffering man shortage, equipment shortage too, but probably more man shortage, right? And of course, this brings up the question: why aren't more Western troops unofficially going in to help them? So people often call it an attritional war, without calling it an attritional war, as being static. But when there's heavy attrition that's developing on one side more than the other, it's not static. And now you're seeing sort of the fruits of that. Now, of course, Kupiansk is located on the Oskol River, and you notice that on the right-hand side of the orange field, that's where the river is. The reason these are not colored in either orange or blue is because probably both sides have RDG units in there. These are like small, highly specialized units, snipers, that kind of thing, that are there to stop any counterattack, so that the battle that is raging within central Kupiansk can continue. Essentially, that's their point. And then the last slide with Kupiansk is a kind of a, 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 a larger view, to put things in context, where this is happening. I've outlined the area that is Kupiansk and the surrounding regions of Kupiansk, like Petropavlovsk, which you can consider like a suburb or the next town over. You can see it's quite large. Now, the thing about Kupiansk is, like, when and if the Russians completely take it, and I think they will, because things have developed too far in their favor at this point. What that means is that blue that you see on the right side, where this salient is growing on the right side of the salient, those men are essentially going to become trapped. They will have to move south because they won't be able to move west. So they'll have to move south and then cross over the Oskol River. And that's what the Russians want. So once Kupiansk falls, that blue section that you see on the east side, the right side of Kupiansk, the Russians, I think, expect it to fall. And that's why they're not pushing head on, because they know that the key is going to be to take Kupiansk, which will move things in their favor. Now, the next battlefield we're going to look at is Pokrovsk, and this is an overall view of it. The salient north of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians made some daring counterattacks over the last 2 weeks, and they were nearly successful at completely cutting off that northern salient, which is on I forget the name of the river, but it's on the west side of the river. And of course, there's a series of towns that run back up north and south in this area. We'll see in the next map. But before I go any further, the Russians now have taken over one of the two large apartment blocks complexes in southern Pokrovsk. The last two days, I haven't seen any updates. Unfortunately, I forgot to make some screen caps of those areas that have been taken. But I would say about a third of Pokrovsk now is under Russian control. Of course, there's also the twin city of Mirnograd, which is immediately adjacent to it. And the northern salient is kind of rests on top of Mirnograd, and that is why the Russians are so determined to keep going here. Now, after the successful Ukrainian counterattacks, which nearly severed this area, um, the Russians have nonetheless been able to stop any further incursions by the Ukrainians, and have in fact started to even retake territory that they had lost over the last few weeks. So the next slide is going to show this a bit more clearly. Um, the orange outlines that you see, those are areas that the Ukrainians have retaken from the Russians. The green outlines are areas that the Russians have taken. And the red outlines are new areas that the Russians have taken. Now, Vladimirovka is the town that the Russians took today, and Shakhove is the town that they want to take next. Now, there is a river that runs through this area. Shakhove is the town north of it, and then Toretske is a town further north, and Sofivka is a town also to the north of Shakhove. And that's what so the arrows, basically, this is the next area where the Russians are going to want to establish a foothold. And this, for them, will now completely secure the northern part. The salient also is on the west side of Konstantinovka. The Russians have been fairly quiet. They made some incursions in Konstantinovka in early August. They were pushed out. It's generally unchanged around there. They made some gains today around Chasov Yar, but it's a small gain. I decided not to include it. And then lastly, we move to the Zaporozhye Dnieper front line. If we look at this sector, the orange that you see, this is a region that belongs to the Dnepropetrovsk region. That it's the light blue rather than the dark blue. That's why it's orange and not red. The reason the Russians are doing this, of course, is they want to go from east to west against two front lines that the Ukrainians have developed over the last year and a half. But those front lines face south, and they're basically there. They were created in expectation that the Russians would rush headlong from south to north, and the Russians have been able to outflank them. Now, this is another sector where things have gone back and forth, as you can see. But I guess I would say this: the trend over the last 2 months is, if the Russians advance and then the Ukrainians push them out, eventually the Russians will retake that territory and keep going. That's the trend I've seen this summer, and it hasn't changed now into October. Um, Russia had more success in August, averaging about 20 square kilometers a day. In September, it was about 16 and a half square kilometers a day. Of course, we've just started November. We've just finished the first third. The next slide will give you a blow up of the kind of fighting that's been happening there. You can see that in this one that there's a grayed out area in Sichneve. Now the Ukrainians made a push here, but the Russians held on to like the last 15% of this little village and managed to do a counterattack. You can see that the blue that was there is not colored anymore, and the reason for it is the Ukrainians have had to withdraw from here. Um, if you make a salient that is so thin and long and deep, you run the risk of encirclement, right? And as you can see, that the Russians have also increased their territory north of this area. And then lastly, this territory that they got beneath this area that you can't see, that's not on the map, and the southwest region of Donetsk on the border of Zaporozhye. And then lastly, and we can ignore that one, Konstantin. I mean, it is an important town, Poltavka, but it's a little bigger than some of the villages. But it's this slide, yeah, the big one that I want to talk about. So you can see the fortifications the Ukrainians have made here in the Zaporozhye region. The big red outline that you see, that's the rest of the Zaporozhye region that the Ukrainians still control. And Zaporozhye city is there, and then you can see the double layer of fortifications running east-west in anticipation of a south to north attack. So the Russians are moving from east to west, and that's why they've taken roughly about 15-20% of these fortifications. Now, the town that the Russians are going to want to control next in this region is Gulyapolye. And that's the arrow moving up. And what they'll want to do then is to flank to the right. This is still obviously a long way off. I imagine that the Russians are going to prioritize the two cities that they're going to prioritize are going to be Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. And I would not be surprised if Kupiansk falls before Pokrovsk. But Pokrovsk is a bigger deal, I think, for the Ukrainians. And that's it for the frontline update.
Well, what
Uh,
more can you really say? And I see, and I know this has been said for quite some time, but I see at this point especially, literally no possible counteractions for the AFU. Are they? Here's the question: are they even at a point where they can mount a proper defense? I don't think so. One of the bigger news stories that stuck out to me about the front lines I saw is that they're starting to evacuate villages on the edge of the Dnepropetrovsk Oblast, which are about 15 miles from the front lines. And I think that's pretty telling of the direction that the war is going to go in. And I know it's easy to say that after Pokrovsk and Kupiansk comes Slovyansk and Kramatorsk,
Mm-hmm.
and after that is the eventual drive to the Dnieper, and that will be considered the, I guess, quote unquote, end of the war, where the Russians can really propose any peace terms that they want. The question is, what is the time frame for that? Because I think that's generally accepted that is what we're looking at going forward.
Yeah.
And the question is, how trigger happy is the West going to be? I think they would love more than anything else to get involved, but the
Yes.
reality on the ground prevents that because of simply military constraints. And look no further than the munitions factory in Tennessee that blew up this week.
Oh yeah.
I
And
think that's
19 are not. 19 people are missing.
it was. I mean, we'll talk about that later.
Oh
Don't
dear
get me
God.
wrong, because
Yeah.
that was wild. But and that followed shortly after, actually, I believe a similar incident in Germany where an arms factory exploded.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
And these things do keep happening, and like I said, we can speculate more on that later. But even with the full force of the United States, which seems to be distracted with both Venezuela and the Middle East, there is, like I said, really no path forward. And I think what we're getting to at this point is what you said last week, GSP. The Russians are going to turn this into a black hole of money and equipment as long as they can, while the West begins their quote unquote rearmament programs, while NATO begins their quote unquote spending boosts in anticipation for a further war. And that, I think, part of the reason there's a push for peace, even among some voices in Europe, I would say Orban and Fico notwithstanding, because I think their intentions are a bit more sincere and a bit more rooted in the best interest of not only their nations but the continent. It is a measure to buy time. But who I'm referring to in particular, Trump met with him, is Finnish President Alexander Stubb, who was saying that Well, Finland agreed to a peace treaty with the Soviet Union where it lost 20. Now, he didn't say this part, where it lost 20% of its territory and agreed to neutrality.
11, I think.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I got the figures mixed up. Ukraine's 20% of its territory. It's
yeah,
about 20%.
yep.
Okay, so sorry, I got the figures mixed up with that. And with that, I do think they are hinting at they want that freeze. They want the war to stop in its tracks so they can prepare for the next phase of
Well,
the larger European Russian war, which may or may not come. I've said many times over the past several weeks on this program, I'm beginning to fear for the worst with that Europe is being led into this war both by forces across the Atlantic and forces at home into a war that would really be mutually destructive, no matter who came out on top. Because, sure, you can talk about the Russians' immense military capability, especially in the wake of this war, but it would be extremely costly for them as well, even to take on such a dilapidated Europe. Now, one would hope that war would be over fast, regardless of the outcome, just simply to spare the bloodshed. But we're talking about another self-destructive war in the old world, less than a century after the last one, and in a reality where multiple factions in this war have what equate to world-ending weapons.
well, it depends what China would do as well in that situation. Like, would they honor their agreement with Russia and seize a sort of like power opportunity, um, or would they be like, well, the side their our bread is buttered on would be with Western consumers, and we can't really like the way that I guess you could say this sort of bellicose attitude they have towards Iran, where it's like, are we really gonna fight that hard with them when it seems that the world order is so sticky and metaphysically weighty, even in its weakened state, to really have an external power challenge the sort of like transnational progressive world order.
Well,
That
I'm
would be,
I,
yeah,
I think the red line for the West is Odessa. I
yeah,
think
probably,
yes.
I
yeah.
think I think that's
Not hit
where
yet.
no, I think that's where I think they are willing to enter. And maybe the reason why they bring up 2029 so often is maybe that is when they expect something like that to happen, you know?
Well, unless the
Um,
Russians catch them flat-footed by going at Odessa in a relatively short amount of time, but that's even they don't have that capability unless they were willing to invoke their the full weight of their military and have like a public draft and yeah.
yeah, I mean, you can talk about Russia on a that it's on a wartime footing, but it's not even it's just a fraction of what it was in World War II. Even America, like virtually every country during World War II was spending over 35% of its GDP on the war, right?
Yeah.
Like Russia's not even at 7% yet, right? So now there's reasons why Russia can't do that. It has a smaller population. Um, the political decision in Russia is determining the pace of the war more than what the military could do if the political will were different. So
They have their
for
own
the West,
demographic problems as well as the West.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so they, 2029 is probably when the West sees that they'll be able to counter Russia in Ukraine. And my guess is that Odessa is going to be the red line where they're willing to fight the Russians in a conventional war because up until now they haven't. Of course, this brings up another problem, and that is, I think a lot of European countries are afraid that should they, like, let's be honest, they don't have enough forces for this war.
Or enough men that are willing to fight.
Yeah, right. Which means conscription, draft, right? I think they're afraid that if that were to happen, they have um they they have civil war to think about, or a revolution in their own countries. I know they can be, anything is possible, but you could argue, for instance, that a lot of Ukrainian men don't want to fight, and a lot of them have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, have left that could fight.
Yeah.
But what would
I don't
happen
really
to
blame them, to
European?
be honest with you, if I was in
No,
that position. Yeah.
I've met two of them who who got out before they could be drafted. I guess what I'm saying is y- you could make the argument that well, they'll just be forced to fight, but Europeans don't look at the war in Ukraine as their war. Not really enough for a draft.
To the point where you
Forced
have Donald Tusk having to cajole his population of Poles, which there's no love lost between them and the Russians, to say, "Oh yes, it is our war."
Yeah, they'll say that rhetorically. They'll say that, but at the
Yes,
same time,
yes.
they will not say that we're going to have a forced draft because we're going to go to war with Russia. None of them can. I mean, they say it, ambiguously, in ambiguous terms, that they're in war with Russia. Look at these Russian drones harassing our airports, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth of the matter is they're not acting like they're ready to go to war over this in the real sense of a war.
Yes, and I will say that both of you have brought up some great points that I do want to address. First off, the Odessa point, I agree 100%. That is the red line, to the point where I think even Turkey would start to sweat over that much Russian control of the Black Sea again. And
Well,
that,
they
Yeah.
lose a lot of their leverage.
yes, they
Yeah.
would. And once again, Turkey, which is that country that is really straddling the line between that, would be forced into a much more pro-Western position, even with all the economic deals they have with Russia, if we were to see a complete capture of the Black Sea coastline. That's number one. Number two, the question of willingness to go to war in Europe and the conscription situation causing immense amounts of civil strife. You have already the dissatisfaction of the population that would be conscripted on top of demographic problems, not only in terms of the birth rates, but in terms of non-European recently imported populations. Think
So
about
would they be
Yes.
willing to fight
think about what would
Russia?
happen if they would try to draft, say, the Algerians in France. They're more likely to take the streets and riot again, like they were last summer. Think about if they were trying to conscript Turks or whatever other Muslim population in
Pakistanis in
Germany.
London.
Oh,
Yeah.
forget it, forget it. Uh,
They would leave en masse. They would just leave.
maybe
Like
this
it
isn't
just
such a bad idea.
maybe no, who knows? Maybe like all of those pro Ukrainian white nationalists, maybe they have
Oh no!
in Europe, like they have a bit of a point, like because then all of the migrants would just deport them. They'd like remigrate themselves.
All the
Like,
migrants leave, but you lose a generation or two of men.
well, yeah, exactly. I think like
That's
that wouldn't be enough of an incentive
it's
in terms
it's
of
it's a real deal with the devil, isn't it?
no, because I think like if you're like a true European nationalist, you're kind of being sandwiched by two different realities. One of them is that, okay, like let's be honest, Russia is a competitor to Western Europe. And if you have the vision that they are presenting a unique civilizational threat, but on the other side, if you have like this sort of transnational progressive world order that hates you anyways and still wants to get rid of you because you're on the right, then you're in sort of like a weird. We've talked about this before on the show. You're in a very weird position where you know that your nationalism is being used against you the way that like a lot of right-wing nationalism in, for example, North America is used against you by a lot of economic stupidity and like GOP, like, you know, you got to hate the poor, including, poor white people as well. And it's a very like slippery thing. Like I understand their argument, I get where they're coming from. And certainly like Russia has their own unique pressures and problems demographically as well. But you are essentially asking the majority male populations of Western Europe who have been essentially marginalized from feeling any sense of loyalty or pride to who they are as a people, you're now giving them a sort of Disneyland Gladio nationalism to be like, okay, now you're going to fight the Russians, and maybe along the way the migrants will remigrate themselves because they don't want to fight your war. But that's not, like, let's face it, that's probably not going to happen. The military age men will probably leave, but not any of their families and any of like the older people and any of the people that are dependent who are children or older. So, it's not really going to rock the boat politically in terms of a lot of these elite plans in Western Europe. Now, I had this debate with somebody. I wanted to get your guys' opinion. I had this debate, I think, in Prude's chat. Um, Someone was pointing out like the official numbers of the GDP of Russia not matching up to that of like Germany and France, let alone all of Western Europe. That's if you believe the numbers. Of course, like a lot of these, oligarchs hide their wealth, the Chinese hide their wealth. But if say like going by official numbers and having fought the war at 7% of their GDP, and having a lot of the very like intense anti-Russian rhetoric in a lot of the EU elite, where they pose Russia as a unique threat to basically like Western democracy and freedom. Like Keir Starmer makes this very explicit when he tries to sell a national draft to people. But you also have, ironically enough, Keir Starmer marginalizing intensely the very people that would get drafted or would be willing to fight with his insane anti-free speech laws. So that aside, though, the argument that the argument that I faced in the chat was that it is true that they have this rhetoric against Russia, but when it comes down to it, a lot of the elites in Western Europe, they're not really willing to sacrifice the majority of their their sort of staggering and flailing economic activity to fighting Russia on a full-scale war, or even though they have sort of thrown everything at the kitchen sink at the Ukraine, the AFU, and now that I think people were saying a lot of the impetus for Russia targeting in a very short amount of time all of their gas production was because Europe and the Trump administration, they were like, okay, uh, now Tomahawk missiles are an option. But that being said, a lot of these European technocrats, they kind of aren't willing to sacrifice everything the way they would in World War II against the Austrian art school, failed art school attendee. So it's a very funny position where they're trying to sort of do a strategy of priming the population, but knowing that it's not really going to work and not really being quote unquote committed. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true. They have thrown a lot of munitions and their military capabilities outside of sending troops to Ukraine, but I wonder if there is sort of like an antipathy of the Western elite to actually fully quote unquote commit to fighting Russia. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Now, at the beginning of this war, actually, even before this war started, when there was the murmurs of it, I cast out that Europe was going to be in full throat support of it because of economic self interest, particularly Germany
Mm,
because of the Nord Stream pipeline projects. We saw what happened there. It's been 3.5 years
yeah.
of this war. The European elite have been pretty browbeaten into the right positions. Now, there might be some turncoats here and there who are willing to maybe take a more moderate position where they will gin up
For
all the
one.
right narratives, but have in their back pocket a more pragmatic view to not only even if not save their nations, save their own bottom line. But considering what I've seen over the past 3 years, the European elites are pretty docile now. Direct involvement is crossing a major red line, so that would have a different reaction. But the question is, could they be browbeaten into it? What I've maintained is that if this war is going to expand, it's going to be they're going to travel from east to west on the continent with countries that get thrown into the meat grinder. The next wave after Ukraine, if this is to continue, the Poles and the
Poland.
Romanians are going to go in. And then
Yeah.
you're going to go a little
And
further. You're going to get the Germans and the French. Eventually, you're going to make it to the Anglos. And then finally, the Americans are going to come in and deliver the long awaited victory after all of Europe has exhausted itself so long as they can be king of the ashes.
But can America deliver that final victory is always a huge
That
question. And
that's the big question
then
mark.
what China would do,
And
which is yeah.
that's assuming we don't all just irradiate each other with nuclear weapons and more or less destroy the world. That's also the other big question mark. That how far would the escalation go in a confrontation like this? Would there be enough restraint for both sides to keep it, let's just say, mostly conventional? I don't think so.
Hmm. Or there could be some kind of like funny business that happens in a major European capital, which is another terrifying prospect. And I think that's why, I mean, certain standard people in the Trump administration, I think a lot of them have, I mean, maybe even JD Vance or Wicott, or I don't know. I mean, I'm not like a big like pro JD Vance shill, but I think that there's certain people in the Trump administration that realize that freezing the conflict is probably to a sort of like North Korea situation would probably be the best bet in terms of the only way to go is to go up, which means expanding the war to involve other Eastern European countries. And by the time you get Poland and Poland and Belarus, I mean Belarus on the Russian side, by the time you get like Poland and Romania and Moldova involved, expanding outward, then any taboo towards expanding westward would be, especially as these armies also start to stutter and fail, then I mean, yeah, that's a pretty terrifying scenario. I personally don't believe it might. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't make any public declaration, but I personally think that there would be a massive incentive. But then you never know because a lot of the sort of like westward European elites, they're very calloused when it comes to any Eastern European. I mean, to them, like the Polish lives, the Romanian lives don't really matter. So
No, they're no different
yeah,
than the Russians. It's just that they are more pliant population. Okay, they have just
yeah,
as much contempt for them for the Romanians because they do look down upon them as lesser, and the only thing they're good for is cheaper outsourcing and cannon fodder.
yeah, and but I think like a lot of people in Poland, they're probably looking at the situation as like, okay, when it comes to like these brown migrants that we put fences up and we put water cannons on them and we repel them from entering our country, I think a lot of them are now starting to say like, okay, but what happens if there is, and this is what people were saying on Twitter and Telegram, what happens this winter if they cannot repair a lot of the pipelines and they have to rely on hundreds of thousands of trucks to import LNG to Ukraine to keep up with heating? What happens if there is huge waves of Ukrainian migrants to exceeding the levels that you have now? Would the Polish people, they look at that and they'd be like, well, why aren't we putting water cannons on them at the border?
I mean,
And we can, yeah,
the the migrant situation in Poland with the Ukrainians is already reaching a boiling point. There's been a lot of what I like to
yeah.
call Ukrainian fatigue because you have a lot of these Ukrainians here, or there, I should say. We're not in Poland. Living on the public
I mean,
dime.
they're not the same, of course. Like they're
No,
not
no,
obviously. You're not going to
it's
compare them
it's
to
not.
Africans.
I
Yeah,
agree. But what the Ukrainians do, and this is not to say anything of the Africans, the Arabs, because that's a different question altogether. What the Ukrainians will do
yeah.
is they'll come there, I'm sorry, live on the public dime in Poland, and then have public rallies celebrating Bandera, who massacred up to 100,000 Poles. And that's the
Oh
thanks they
man!
get for taking them into their country. And
And then Tusk would be like, "Kayfabe, kayfabe, kayfabe."
yeah. Tusk
Yeah.
and at that point even Navrotsky will get up there and they'll be mealy mouthed about it. But that's where you start to get street
Can I say
violence.
the N word? Can I say the NZ word here on this platform?
No class.
No, I mean like the Austrian painter. Can I say the word
Yeah,
power
yeah.
word?
We're far enough in; it wouldn't matter.
Oh, okay, yeah. So like I was gonna say the N word. No, the other one, the ideological one.
Yeah,
No,
go
I
ahead.
mean, I think there are like some like weirdo tankies that believe that like the Eastern European and the Western European elites, they're like secret Nazis still, and like that's why they're kind of like Russia shills. But like, that's not really true. I just think that it wouldn't be like, I'm not using that word kayfabe. I mean, I'm using that just as a funny aside. But what I mean is, I think Tusk would be like, obviously, if there is a significant portion of Ukrainian migrants who are aligned with the nationalist battalions, obviously Tusk would be like, okay, you can't do this on Polish streets. You can't celebrate Bandera. That's just like, become, be a good guest, in other words. And the whole thesis that, like, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of Russian boomers also believe this, where they're like, Western Europe, they're like secret Nazis, but they're like homofash. They're like Death in June fans. Like that's not true. I mean, unfortunately, like Russia has their own boomer problem, but like I just think that there would create even more tensions there. And a lot of Polish people will be like, okay, I mean, we hate the Russians too for historical reasons, but there still would be a massive amount of problems with migrants, even if, a lot of Ukrainians, they are model migrants compared to the other ones. But that being said, it's still putting a strain on a lot of institutions in general. It's not that Ukrainians are bad people. It's not like a lot of the, let's call them Asians, as they call it in the UK media, the UK. Um, it's just that it puts a massive strain on their politics, on their institutions, and it would be the sort of like charity of the Polish and the Romanians, I think, would riff in. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And another thing about the energy crisis in Ukraine, even if it doesn't get to the point where you have migrants flowing over the border, you're getting to the point now with the energy strikes where Europe has to send more and more of its energy to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I will remind you guys that political situation is much different, but it is worth bearing in mind. Ceausescu was killed because people were freezing to death in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you could risk a scenario like that. Now, like, I don't know what
He
the.
got what he fucking deserved in history, eh? That's like one of those, yeah.
It's just, but I don't know what the, say, level of discontent is in Europe right now. But if you do start to have winters where people are freezing to death, that might lead to further violence.
No, and why should the Polish suffer for a lot of the geopolitical blunders of Western Europe and America?
I mean,
That's
the
another
the
thing,
reason
too.
the reason for this war in the first place is it wasn't good for America or for to a lesser extent for Britain.
Right, right.
That's why this war is happening. It wasn't because Russia had plans to take over Eastern Europe. All of this was nonsense. The main issue was European Russian integration, economically speaking, was going along too swimmingly. And you can see that every every American president had issues with this, particularly from Bush Jr. onwards. If for all of them, this was an issue. And the first stages of this war were developed, of course, under the Obama administration. Trump carried it forward. Biden, of course, helped usher in the hot war. But the
Hey,
issue was
Obama sent
always,
blankets, Trump sent guns.
yeah. Um, the issue was integration, and I've said it before. Like, America is not a shield for Europe. Europe is a spear point for America, and they will they cannot tolerate basically a Eurasian pact that is economically strong. I mean, I said this on the last show about how Stalin understood that. I mean, if you think of Russia as this treasure trove of resources, right? And Stalin is this, dragon guarding it. He's not invincible, right? But he understands that if it looks like the Germans are going to take this, and they're going to control Russia, et cetera, and Eastern Europe. And they're going to create this integration. He understood that if that's what it looks like, the West will then begin, particularly America, will begin funding Russia like there's no tomorrow. And to make sure that that doesn't happen. If there was a stalemate, both sides would be funded. If Russia was going to be pushing towards Berlin, then Germany would be funded. So he understood by allowing Barbarossa to happen in the first place that the Soviet Union would essentially increase its industrialization and it would get the aid that it needed. Right.
Doesn't
But
this come
for
up in
that to
Someone's
happen,
War by McMeekin? Yeah.
no, I haven't read it. And I'm just saying nothing about that has changed. It was true in Napoleon's time, it's true now. But it's even more true now because the modern world demands these resources. You could argue that one of the things that the West is betting on, right? And you wonder if Putin is aware of it, is that if this war drags on, maybe Europe doesn't have to enter Ukraine. Maybe it doesn't have to create a false flag or provoke Russia to attack NATO in some other area other than Ukraine. Maybe all it has to do is wait for Putin to come to the point where he has to go for re-election again. And will he do it? And what will the population think if he doesn't? Because I think they're confident. This is why Putin is always singled out. They're confident that he is such a man of history, right? He is such a unique figure in the Hegelian sense that after him, there's nothing, there's no one, first of all, that can compare to him now, anyways. So they're thinking after he's gone, it's not going to be that hard. That could be also a strategy, and you would wonder whether Putin is aware of that. I've heard other strategies that include Iran, right? That the Iranian elite basically think that the only way to defeat America in the Middle East, at least, is for America to commit ground troops in Iran. Of course, America would bomb Iran for at least 6 months, and they would destroy everything,
Like
just
Gulf
like they
War
did in
One.
Iraq. They would
Yeah.
destroy public works, would bomb civilians. They would destroy water filtration, electricity, everything, and then they would go in. Um, I mean, it could be a victory for Iran. It would be Pyrrhic to a great extent. What would happen to Iran after that, I don't know. But the game theory for that is that that America will have an even worse time than it did in Iraq. But look what it did for Iraq. Iraq is now a completely unofficially, but it's balkanized. It's a balkanized country. It's not a threat to anybody. Um, the stated goals of the U.S. when Bush Jr. invaded haven't come to fruition. On the other hand, destroying the country is probably secretly what they wanted, and it's probably all that they ever wanted.
And the
So,
oil is secure to go from the Kurdish regions to Israel, so that's another goal
yeah,
accomplished.
yeah,
And much the
yeah.
same with
So,
Syria, with where they put in a fraction of the effort,
mhm,
at least in
mhm.
terms of direct involvement, I should say, because they
Right. Yeah, I mean, they sunk billions into that, and whatnot. So I would say that there's probably still like a. I'm sure the Ukrainians are under the impression that that the Americans and the Europeans will eventually enter the war, and that could be one of the reasons why they're still fighting. Um, but again, the attrition rate, because they don't have I mean, really an air force to speak of. Like when Russians take over these places, I mean, they first use like all these glide bombs, and you know, granted, it's not 2023 or early 2024 anymore, and the Ukrainians probably don't have such huge concentrations of men the way they used to. Both sides are now deploying very different strategies from the previous years. They're using much smaller forces to essentially accomplish the same thing, but still, heavy attrition is happening for Ukraine, which is why they've had no momentum since the end of 2022. And so you could say, Odessa is the red line, but there's also a lot of European elites that they'll talk the rhetoric that they're going in, but really what they're doing is they're waiting for Putin to exit, and that's when they believe that they can capitalize on a situation that once Putin exits, right, the glue that's keeping the country together might dissolve. So I think that's another strategy.
Oh, absolutely, and that's been something they've openly discussed for years: the post-Putin Russia and what's it going to look
Yeah, but
like.
that could
And
take decades, even.
It
I
could,
think at least
like,
another
I mean,
decade.
it's a bet, right? Like, one of the things that they're doing now is all these guys that have served in the war are being promoted to positions of mayors and whatnot, um, eh, to government positions, because they want this generation to rule Russia in the future. They have to be represented, and uh, I mean that makes maybe the Western anticipation of a post-Putin Russia, slightly skewed against them. So I don't know, but I also find it interesting that there's a theory that the, the the Russians and the Iranians want America to commit to a ground war in Iran, but I don't see how they would do that. Because that's the other issue, right? Is the West does not have right now a huge land army, right? Constantine, you remember in the summer of 2024, I broke down a podcast I listened to. He's a Russian Jew, I think Kostkin or whatever, and he goes, the last great armies that we had were the Soviets and the Chinese. He just openly says that. He goes, and the army that we have now are the Ukrainians. We don't have anybody other than the Ukrainians right now, right? So again, then the question comes to Europe. Are they going to draft? If they draft, they run the risk of politically destabilizing their countries. Because I think it's obvious, because of like this boomer generation that is, demanding, a very affluent lifestyle in their golden years, as it
infinite
were,
pensions.
Oh, like
infinite
that Canadian
pensions.
boomer on Twitter that said, like, I got my third, me and my husband got our third pension. Did you see that tweet, GSP?
No, I haven't.
She deleted it
Third
because she got
pension.
ratioed into oblivion. It was hilarious.
Yeah. So, like, this is why I don't know what they're going to do with this excess population. Are these guys really going to go back or not? Does the government of the UK want like all these foreign people that they brought in to keep the pensions going? Are they going to are they going to want them to leave? I don't think so. Right? Because where does that leave Europe? I mean, Britain is going to receive an IMF loan. When's the last time that Britain received an IMF loan? Like, their economies are not where they need to be, and this is the same. This is also true in France and Germany.
Oh, we'll
There,
get to
none of
France.
these
Don't worry.
countries are. Yeah, none of these countries are that politically stable. Can you imagine them asking to be like asking for a draft from their young men, and they would expect from native Britons, native French, native Germans to sign up the most,
Because that's who would fight, not like the migrants.
not the migrants. No,
I
They
think,
wouldn't.
if you look at it generationally, GSP, I think like maybe if you look at people like Keir Starmer, then there could be an element of like generational warfare and trauma in the sense that when they're waiting for all of the boomers to slough off and not have those huge liabilities at the end of their life like they did, the pensions, the health care, then maybe the boomers are thinking, okay, we're not going to be around for a long time, but the people that we hand the keys off to, the Gen Xers, maybe when we relieve them of our burden, then the Gen Xers will take up the mantle and that they'll invoke like whatever aged millennial and Zoomer native sons are left to go and fight this war for fucking Western democracy or whatever. But that's not going to work because their populations would have been so demoralized and bankrupted both by the extraneous costs of the boomer world order, but also by the migrant situation and
Yeah,
by
yeah.
other realities. Yeah. It just wouldn't work no matter how you slice it. Even if you were to just mark off the ledger the liabilities of the boomers through their going into the beyond en masse in old age. It
Mhm.
just the logic wouldn't work no matter what.
I think there
And who knows?
is
Maybe even Russia would be different by then. You never know. But yeah, I'm
there.
assuming Putin would also be a part of this boomer generation that sloughs off as well. So, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think Russian society is still different
Yeah, yeah,
than Western society in that regard. I don't know how good their pensions are. Um, they still like they have higher expectations of taking care of your aging parents at home than they do here. Like, yeah, that kind of reminds me of my childhood in Yugoslavia. So, I mean, I think I think even continental Europe is a little different than that. It's the Anglosphere that enjoyed incredible amounts of wealth post World War II, where those kinds of boomer expectations are very high, right?
yeah,
Yes.
Um, so in some ways, some of these older continental populations, I mean, older like in terms of like age demographics. I mean, with an old world outlook of a household with three generations, as it were.
yeah.
Man, I would completely agree. But in terms of the West's demographic and military crisis vis-a-vis Russia, I think they have one very dangerous gamble they can take in order to put Russia on the ropes. I've discussed this before, and that's the
Mhm.
Turkic world. They have the demographics, they have the
Uh,
militancy, they have the bone to pick with Russia. And we're already seeing this with the de facto connection of Turkey and Azerbaijan via Armenian territorial concessions across the Caspian Sea into the wider Turkic world. Where if they are able to, I would say, probably play to both their nationalism and an Islamic revival. And you see this among a lot of the Uzbeks and Turkmen who go and fight in places like Syria and Libya and Iraq. That can just as easily be turned against Russia. And I think this population is primed to be put on Russia. I mean, they already are on Russia's doorstep, but they can be primed into the next anti-Russia bloc. However, that runs the risk
Mhm.
of this
Mhm.
Turkic world isn't necessarily going to be forward Western looking. We want to be part of a greater European sphere, especially if they have to play to their nationalism and their religious sentiments. They are risking reviving something of a pan Turkic Islamic outview. That now we know the West has no problem playing enemy of my enemy. They've done it many times before, but I think that is probably the one out that they have is to appeal to the Turkic world.
Right. Which I think also might be why there's still this laser focus on Iran. Like, Iran is absolutely crucial. It is this gateway into Central Asia. It is an incredibly important partner for Russia. like taking Iran away would absolutely isolate Russia,
Not to mention China.
and not to mention China. Yeah. Now you can have this this relationship that's exclusive, let's say, to Russia and China, that can go on for a long time, which is something that the Soviet Union didn't have. Remember, it didn't have the Iranians on their side, and partnership with China broke off, and of course, part of the reason the Soviet Union fell is it removed 40% of its forces on the Western Front to Asia because of the deals that were struck between Nixon and Mao. That was a crucial move, right? China's not. I mean, I personally don't. China. How can I put it? China's a world unto itself, in my opinion. They don't. They do not want to lead a new global order.
No,
Like
not at all. They
the
want.
the, the 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 beef between them and the Americans originates with the Americans. The Americans wanted them to be this manufacturing colony indefinitely and change their culture into like whatever the fuck you call American culture. Like we were joking earlier about Botswana adopting gay marriage. Um, but I mean that's part and parcel of the American capitalist model. So
They want China to become like Japan, where they're like in awe of American culture.
right, right, but even Japan is able to resist that to some degree.
Oh yeah,
Much to
definitely.
the
Culturally.
chagrin of the Western liberal elite, you'll see.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, look at the kvetching over this woman who was allegedly going to become prime minister. I mean, she is completely in line with, say, the establishment narrative in terms of American cooperation in the Pacific, but she's more nationalistic in her rhetoric, which, I mean, they need to tolerate to a certain degree, but you can still see all the kvetching from the usual suspects with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not like us exactly. Why? Um, so
Welcome back, Yukio Mishima.
that's right. Yeah, so I don't know. That's the other thing. I've said it before on probably every show, but by the end of 2023, when it was obvious that the Ukrainian summer offensive failed, and they tried even well into the autumn, and then the Russians were basically starting to gain success around Avdiivka. I said, like, if the Americans and the West don't like ramp up their military production, then like, and they still want to win, they're going to have to win in an unconventional way, not a conventional way. And I don't see any move toward, like, there's no significant progress in that. The Russians still outnumber them like 4-1 in terms of production. You're talking about like the wealthiest group of nations in the world, and they're not committing to it. Why aren't they committing to it? Right? Why is that?
Yeah.
Right? There's something fundamentally off here. What's the real story? Are they afraid if they go on a wartime footing, that will disturb, like, Western populations are already angry with very low trust of their elites and their institutions. I think they're afraid of pissing them off even more, but they're coming to a point where, as we keep harping on about in this episode, with let's say reference to Odessa entering Ukraine or broadening the war somewhere else in Eastern Europe, they're like, eventually they will have to do something like that unless they want to resolve this thing unconventionally. And the only peaceful unconventional method I see is that they wait out Putin.
Yeah.
And that's not like a for sure thing.
The
Like,
guy who could come after Putin would be worse.
could be, could be.
Yeah.
I think what they're betting on is not so much the guy being worse than Putin, but the guy after Putin cannot keep the country together. That's what I think they're betting on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
No,
and
but I mean, like, it's just they're bidding on someone who's incompetent, someone who
Right,
kind
or
of
just
like,
doesn't have the charisma to lead,
or
to
yeah, kind of
unify
like
the
what Yeltsin,
country. You need charisma for that.
unironically, what Yeltsin wanted Putin to be, but didn't happen. Like that's what they want. They just want like a do-over of Putin for in the eyes of Boris Yeltsin. Um, uh, so, but the Turkey aspect is interesting because, like, Islam has always been like a contentious issue in Russia, and there's like a substantial part of like right wingers that on the internet who are like, well, they're also like bringing in the Muslims, and they're also like against their own demographics, blah blah blah. But if they were to fight Turkey, um, it would pose a serious question because you really couldn't contain that sort of like pan-Turkish, pan-Arab, a sort of second Islamic revival.
that's also on
You
top
would,
of the
yeah,
very I would say tenuous peace Russia has with its Chechen population, which is maintained
yes,
pretty much through the mutual relationship of the Kremlin and the Kadyrov family, where it's
right.
like it is like almost a feudal system where their personal loyalty to the Russian state is what keeps Chechnya in line. Now, I'm sure there's probably been some social changes since. I know, for example, if you go to like Tatarstan, one of the internal republics within Russia, they're very secularized and they're very, let's just say, amenable to Russian culture. Not entirely, but compared to some of the other Muslim populations. But uh, if you were to see, say, an Islamic revival, which could also play into some of the stuff that they're doing, maybe with the recognition of Palestine, uh, seeing an Islamic revival, that could turn the opinion of a lot of, let's just say, for lack of a better word, native Russian Muslims, these populations that aren't imported, but these populations that were conquered and integrated in the Russian state centuries ago, where if they smell blood in the water and they think they can be part of, the, say, like the greater Islamic or Turkic world, they might take that opportunity. And I do think that's one of
Mm-hmm.
the
Hmm.
unconventional solutions they do have up their sleeve when it comes to Russia, is provoking these minority populations. We saw hints of this with the church and synagogue attack in Dagestan. We've seen that a lot of these attacks in Russia, like Crocus, were carried out by Tajiks. Now, I'm not sure whether that was a Russian national or I think that one was a migrant. But point being is these Central Asian countries, and I don't blame them, are willing to dump off their dregs of society on whoever will take them, whether it's in Russia, whether it's in Turkey and Syria to be used as proxy jihadists, or really wherever they can send them. And
Well, I mean, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's the big threat there, and I think that's what they are banking on. And if you do get that window of somebody who comes after Putin, because Putin's not going to live forever, let's face it, uh, and he doesn't have the strength to really say maybe continue with the patronage network with the Kadyrov family or whatever puppet isn't the right word, but whatever client they have there, or isn't able to navigate any of these other ethnic or social issues, that's when it could be deployed. Sure, this could be like the most based Russian nationalist ever, but if he doesn't have the political capital and the governing ability to manage all of these factions within Russian society, there are people in Western intelligence agencies and NGOs that are on standby, ready to light that fire under Russia.
Well, we saw this in the previous latter half of the previous century, where the Islamic world, whether it was the Soviets or the post-Soviet Federation, for example, Osama bin Laden's letter, what was it, the letter to America or whatever? He had this like very funny idea where he blamed Russia for a lot of like, well, for Chechnya, and even though um, there was, that he had this idea that like Putin was cooperating with the West when it was actually the opposite. We all know a lot of the like the bioluminescent connections within Chechnya that were funding and aiding and training a lot of those
Yeah,
Islamic
no kidding.
radicals. Yeah, and so like Osama bin Laden had this like weird hard on for the Russians because of what happened in Afghanistan, and he didn't realize like actually no, you were the puppet once again being used against Russia, which
Right.
the West considered more legitimate enemy than the Islamic world up until up until like the late 90s, and then with the global war and terror. So, I mean, I think what the West could bank on would be essentially what happened to Iraq and Afghanistan, where all of those like radicalized populations within Western Europe, that it would be like if, say, Turkey and the Islamic world had this jihadist mindset against Russia, then it would become like a huge sucking sink of all of the more problematic Islamic populations. They're like, okay, if you really want global jihad, go and fight the Russians.
And
Kind
we've
of like
seen,
with Afghanistan, yeah.
you brought up the example of Afghanistan and the Soviet Union, but we've seen these low IQ, frankly, jihadists who have been weaponized in this way before. Mind you, one of the largest
Yeah, in
Muslim
Syria,
armies in
Chechen, yeah.
centuries gathered on the border of Israel. And you know what they did in 2011? They marched on Damascus instead. So we've seen
Yeah,
this happen
yeah.
before, and they could very well do the same thing. And I guarantee you, Israel will still be continuing its expansionist policies. They'll still probably be bombing the hell out of Gaza, yet you will have these low IQ jihadist Muslims who are wanting to take the fight to the Russians. And I, I'm not going to make
Well,
any
you could use all
guarantees.
sorts of propaganda against them. You could tell them that, like, kind of like what, certain, like, people on the right, you could tell them that, like, oh, like, Putin's controlled by the Chabadniks, and, you know,
Or
you
Yeah,
they
could
could,
use
whatever.
all sorts of
the,
propaganda. Yeah.
or the Ashkenazi Jews are Slavic European colonists. That's another one that you can. That's
There you
another
go.
narrative
Yeah,
they can
no, it's so
twist.
perfect. Like these fucking idiots in like Langley in the State Department and in Brussels, they don't know what they're doing. Like there could be like so many things you could do to like dick over the relation between Erdogan and Putin. Like there's so many things you could like so many propaganda narratives you could do to like slyly shift the Islamic revival against Eastern Europe as a whole. Like not to say I think this is good, obviously. I just think that if you really had some creativity, kind of like what these entities had during the Cold War, of course, like Kissinger was there, not Victoria Nuland or whoever.
Oh, if
Then, like, you
Brzezinski
could
was alive,
really,
he would be working overtime.
yeah, no, like Brzezinski talks about this in that book he wrote before the
Grand
Grand
Chessboard.
Chessboard, the
Oh, no, the one
Tectonic
before.
World. Yeah, yeah, he talks about the Islamic world and its role in like the transformation of the Western world and the sort of you have to like really use these people against themselves and against their own interests and against the interests of people that you deem the enemy. And they largely did that up until the global war on terror.
And they still
I mean,
got
you
him to
have to
do it in
realize that,
Syria again. They took all
yeah,
these Al Qaeda guys who were like, la 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 la, like we're gonna, attack America, whatever. And it's like, oh, I know you're on the border of Israel. I know the Golan Heights is right there, but you need to march on Damascus. You need to march on the Kafar Assad and overthrow him, and all these and the Iranians. They're all infidels because they're Shias.
yeah,
All the elements are right there, and they can play into
Like
this.
what about the Talmudists that break into the Al-Aqsa Mosque and perform rituals in there, almost at will? Like, what about them? No, Assad's the bigger problem. Like, you're the stupidity is beyond belief.
Trust me, guys. The Hadith said we have to take Damascus before we can retake Palestine. It's
yeah.
it's all right there.
No, apparently Assad spends hours upon hours every day
Yeah,
playing video
playing
games.
video games.
A well-earned
Yeah.
vacation, might I add.
Can you imagine playing Assad in like Dota or whatever? Like, oh man, he plays Helldivers every day.
I, I believe it.
No, but that's what I mean. It's very it's very like you guys were talking about Jelani
Ugh.
having his moment at the UN. Like it's just like I don't know, like it's kind of a very interesting thing because a lot of these Islamic populations, like they obviously have their own sense of nationalism, and a lot of them I've noticed on the internet they'll like crib certain right wing talking points. Um, and so obviously I think some of them realize that, being like a stooge for powers that you're saying that you allegedly hate is not going to work in the long run. And I think it probably won't because every time the West tries to play this dangerous game of ginning up these Islamic populations against their enemies. It never works out. I mean, imagine the global war on terror, but centered towards Turkey, because Turkey would decide that Eastern Europe isn't good enough, and
We need
these
Crimea
Western
back and the
populations
slave
are
trade.
decadent. Yeah, like there would be huge amounts of blowback the way there was in the Afghanistan war with the Soviet Union. And so whoever comes after Erdogan, if he is a tried and true Islamist, he probably would be able to screw up a lot of things for Russia in the long run, especially if you take Iran off the table. But I mean, a few decades from now, like let's say 20 years from now, I don't think like having a radicalized Islamist revival Turkey on the border of Europe, I don't think that would be very advantageous to Western elites. And I'm not like even like one of these like, you know, global war and terror boomer conservative types that's like, you have to go after, radical Islam, man. I mean, of course, like radical Islam does present a lot of problems in Europe, obviously, though goes without saying. But I'm not like one of these types. But at the same time, I feel that there is a huge problem in having Turkey divest itself from sort of like its more, secular strongman Ataturk like politics and embracing a true like global caliphate Wahhabist ideology. That would be something that a lot of elites in Western Europe would look at themselves like, what are we doing? I mean, because after they finish Russia, what are they going to do? They're not going to accept any sort of like detente or deal cutting
Yeah, there's
in
only
that
so many
regard, the way that
Balkan
Erdogan would.
countries they can sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, a lot of this is like Western Europe thinking that there is like the elites of Western Europe and Brussels thinking that Eastern Europe and Turkey is this huge buffer zone that they could just sacrifice at will. And certainly a lot of those populations in Poland and Serbia, I don't think they would be amenable to like, fighting alongside these jihadists because they hate Russia. Like I think it's such a dangerous political gamble, and I think that a lot of people within these elite, functionary classes, they just haven't really learned the lessons of the failures of the global war on terror, or the failures of the first Islamic revival in the mid 20th century, and I don't think that there's enough like I think like if you were to look even like when it comes to the political right, there was this thing in the in the 2010s where you have certain figures that would look at the Islamic world's relation to a certain regime in Germany, and they're like, well, I guess they're fighting the modern world too, and they're perennialism, and there's certain French New Right people like Seurat that they really had this thing with they had this fascination with radical Islam, and in Britain you had certain I'm not going to name him, but I'm not going to name the group, but there's certainly a guy that there was a few right wingers that converted to radical Islam in Britain, put it that way. But I think like that discourse, even on the political right, that's become very um there's a hostility to that sort of like perennialist discourse. And I think like a lot of people would not be conned, even like when it comes to Western populations, even on the political right. I don't think you could get them to be like, actually, yes, this whole like Ghanaian, who is that guy that, he was like the head of a lot of Islamic groups that met with Hitler. What was that guy's name? He looked like
Um,
Ryan Gosling.
I know who you're talking about. I can't put my
Yeah, he
finger
looks
on it.
exactly like Ryan Gosling.
He did. He did. I know who you mean.
Yeah, like he was part of the SS and you know, like I don't think that that would be like a particularly attractive polemic for elites to manipulate Western right wingers into fighting whatever war that would come about. I don't think that discourse would be desirable to a lot of people. And in the political right, I mean, maybe in the political left, that's much more amenable to Islam because of the Palestine thing, you could essentially get them to realize this sort of logic of like, well, if radical Islam is going to help us fight global fascism funded by Russia, that would be a very easy sell.
And there's
But in
already
terms of
this narrative
yeah,
there, and you see this play out time again, where of course a lot of the
Well, why do you think they let Jelani?
a lot of the Gladio people say, "Oh, Russia's this is Islamophilic society, whatever." But a lot of people on the left, you talk to them, say Russia is an Islamophobic country that oppresses its Muslims, and
Yeah.
Russia is another Israel. And that's a narrative I've seen even
They make
before the
this
Gaza
connection
war.
between Gaza and the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
They make this.
And I'm talking like I don't know, probably sometime in the 2010s, I would see like a lot of these lefty types, especially like these lefty types were very pro regime change in Syria. Like a lot of the pro Kurdish types are like, well, Russia's just oppressive.
YPG, Glow
Yeah,
Dark,
they look what they did to the
Bryce
Chechens. Look at
Belland or whatever his name is. Bryce, you know the guy from Trinon.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about, but I the pieces are there for the narrative. But you do bring up an interesting point that if you want to increase right wing sympathies for Russia, put them in a civilizational war against Islam. like,
Oh yeah, definitely, no, 100%. Like then you would have like the sort of like right wingers that hate Russia. I think like the narrative that Russia is a very pro-Islamic country or federation. I think like that would go away very quickly.
The other element that I think they could play on here, which is a much smaller pool to draw from, is more proper like pan-Turkic nationalism that maybe isn't completely secular but downplays the role of Islam. Where I mean, there's plenty of Turkic populations in Russia, many of whom are actually serving in the military right now, and that has to do with a lot of say economic incentives. But they could play a let's just say moderately more secular nationalist path with a lot of these groups, especially. I mean, look at post-Soviet Kazakhstan, where you had what was effectively the ethnic cleansing of Russians and ethnic Europeans out of there. So
yeah, Amin al Husseini. That's what I was thinking of it. Amin al Husseini.
Yes,
looks exactly like Ryan Gosling. He
He
was
really
all
did.
over, man. Like he like was with the Nazis. He like went to Palestine. He went to Egypt. Like he was everywhere. Like he met with perennialists. Like he was like, man, there's like a lot of deep lore about him. I think like, I mean, I don't think that would exactly work. I mean, the point being is that utilizing radical Islam for geopolitical ends has really never worked out for the Western world.
but it's also never stopped them.
But also never stopped them. I mean, will it really work out for Syria now that Assad is gone? No, it won't. People were talking about that. Someone asked me in a DH super chat, what's the role of the Kurds in Syria now with Jelani, and is he going to oppress them the way that he's oppressed the Christians and Alawites? I don't know what's going on with what is going on with the Kurds.
Well, there was a flare up.
Yeah.
So the SDF, there's still talk that the Americans are going to abandon the Kurds. The SDF, Syrian Democratic Force. I mean, that's what they are. It's a Kurdish force. And so there was a flare up in, if I'm not mistaken, Constantine, it was either in Aleppo or Damascus. I think it was in Aleppo.
I think it was in actually a little north of Aleppo, one of the smaller satellite towns.
Right. So there was fighting between the Jelani jihadists, who are now the official army of Syria, and
mostly Central Asian once again.
Yeah. So I mean, the Kurds are like, I don't know if they can be abandoned, right? I definitely think Israel would be very much against the Kurds being abandoned.
Yeah.
They're too valuable for proxy in the region in both Syria and Iraq, especially the Iraqi ones who are sitting in the oil fields. The SDF is also sitting on the Syrian oil fields as well. And once again, where does that oil go? To Israel. It's one of their main energy supplies. So the idea of abandoning the Kurds is really out of the question for anyone who takes the American empire as a product seriously.
I mean, look at the bombing campaign Israel did and the territory that it took right up to the suburbs of Damascus over, since the fall of Assad last December. Does that look like somebody who who trust literally the jihadis that they helped defeat Assad, right? The moment that he's gone, that's when they turn on him. But they funded him. They funded them just to get rid of Assad.
But it's okay. Jelani said he wants to sign the Abraham Accord, so it's all good now.
Like, did they know? Like, just like I don't know. Do Sunni Muslims realize like how weak and stupid they look? Did they understand that? Like, here are three men of European descent, either Orthodox or Catholic. Do they know how they look to us? You know,
It's
I don't know. They look. I mean, just the amount of times the West has been able to play them. I'm so glad you brought up Geo, Osama bin Laden's
what's the
letter
difference?
and
Yes.
his hate
Letter to
on, like,
America.
they like they'll use the excuse, oh, the Shias massacre. No, you were like this even before the war in Iraq. Like you're I don't know. You look like dummies.
There could have been like so many things that could have prevented the blunders of the global war on terror. There could have been like a lot of geopolitical sanity that just wasn't seen as advantageous to the elites in the West and the Islamic world, and the elites in another world. Um, it's just like, yeah, it's kind of.
Well, I
Anyways,
mean, it kind of goes back all the way to the Iranian Revolution,
oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
right? Like the moment that the Shah fell and there was an Iranian religious theocratic revolution, Saudi Arabia kind of freaked out, and of course, in November of 1979, the you know there was nearly a takeover in Medina, right? Sorry,
Mhm.
in Mecca. So that happened the same year, and so they became very worried that their own, I call them if you want religious extremists or whatnot,
I think
but
zealot is
they're
probably the.
zealot, yeah, their own religious zealots. They're afraid of being toppled by them. Um,
Well, the same
Well,
fear.
plus they had America over a barrel because of the OPEC crisis as well. That was another thing, and they were worried about their power structure there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, in many ways, um, the Ayatollah, the Iranian Revolution, in many ways, brought a lot of these countries on side with the Americans to some extent, in a limited way, but it brought them over because now there was a new boogeyman in the Middle East. They're uh, they're fellow Muslim, but they're not really Muslims. Um, they're heretics, et cetera, are showing signs of independence and so on and so on. But they made an exception for them. But of course, a lot of these Sunni Gulf states, they became sworn enemies of the Soviet Union because they were atheists. And in many ways, one of the things that Putin is trying to do is create a narrative of traditional values. It's perennialist. It's not specifically Christian, although in Russia itself, it emphasizes Christianity. But there is this idea that they're both countries, Iran and Russia, are trying to project as being anti-West because the West itself is no longer Christian and no longer faithful and no longer religious or traditional for that matter, right?
Right.
And but in many ways, Sunnis themselves have not been completely persuaded. For example, take Syria, right? They are a kind of a civilization unto themselves, and and they're closed too, which is interesting, right? Because in some ways they want to expand and reestablish their own ideas of a caliphate, I suppose, to a degree. You know, revive some of that, recapture some lost glory, but um, it doesn't. None of their leaders can look ahead strategically very well. Of course, part of the issue here is all of them are afraid of Israeli nukes. That's one of the reasons for some of their inaction around Palestine. I think Israel went whole hog. Yes, they destroyed 80 years of soft power and victimhood um, narrative in what they've done to Palestine. There's generations now that will always look at Israel as an evil country
Hmm.
and an evil people. Um, but it remains to be seen, like if the elites in the Sunni Gulf state world can really even capture this. I don't think they can. You know, the other beef, of course, Osama bin Laden had was that there were U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia, and he wanted them
Yes.
gone.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I mean, the Russians didn't put them there.
Hmm.
But in any case, the poor guy bit off more than he could chew. So
Yeah, I guess that's the lesson about Osama bin Laden. Yeah.
Is
You
Bin
bit off more than you
Laden
could chew.
the #1 recipient of the Fell For It Again award?
Oh
no.
my god. He
uh,
was an amazing man. He lived an amazing life. No, I'm kidding.
you know what? We can at least be glad that he didn't live too long after 9/11 to really see what a disaster the war on terror turned out to be.
Oh, shit.
Kidney Team
I don't know.
Kidney Team
Afghanistan's
6
doing
did him
all
in.
right.
Oh yeah, kid. Yeah. Well put.
At least that's what I've been told, and I'm inclined to believe. No later than
Didn't he
2006.
have a copy of Half-Life he was playing
Allegedly.
before he died?
Yeah,
Allegedly,
Yeah,
allegedly.
that's
And
yeah.
he was into anime and
Yeah, he loved Serial Experiments Lane. He loved it.
you
I
know.
mean, how much of this is true? I mean, who knows? It's crazy if it is,
I
but
mean,
like,
also,
Apparently, he
you
had
know, they
like
could
Iranian
make
big
that up.
titty porn as well. That was another thing. He had like Iranian big titty porn.
Uh,
That was they
you
would like use
you really
porn to
did
like
betray the
decode.
cause.
Yeah, yeah, that was the thing. Like they said, they like used porn to like pass decoded jihadist messages. But that was like kind of like Muhammad Atta and like the 9/11 hijackers. They were like seen in a strip club the night before. Like I don't know. It's like a very weird.
well, I mean, with
Yeah.
the hijackers, that makes sense because they believe under the principle of jihad that it's all going to be absolved as soon as they commit this glorious act, well, or what they would call a
Yeah,
glorious act.
there's
And
a lot of last kick of the can sort of deal.
yeah, and I mean, also with Bin Laden's computer, if you're to even believe that, he also lived with like what several dozen children, multiple cousins, and how many concubines. So it's like a lot of people were probably using that computer.
Oh yeah, definitely.
um,
That's
but like I said, that's assuming any of it's real. I have my reasons to doubt that, and I have my reasons to doubt that Bin Laden lived past 2006. But that's neither here nor there.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
But
I,
anyways,
I suppose.
Palestine.
Yes. We'll come back to Europe later because there's only so much you can say about French government dysfunction. But yeah, we have two watershed events, which is the anniversary of October 7th, which was, what did Netanyahu call that? Like 8/9/11s, something like that.
Fifteen.
Uh, right in front of U.S. Congress, and if you protest that at all, we're gonna have the sergeant at arms detain you. That's one thing. The other thing is the greatest ceasefire deal that's going to hold probably actually has already been broken several times by the Israelis, and will
Yeah.
probably completely fail. I give it next few weeks. Perhaps that's too optimistic of a timeline, but I could see through the end of the month it might hold. And really, I'm left wondering, assuming phase 1 is complete and that in earnest phase 2 is moved into, and that this really is some sort of jerry-rigged peace agreement. It seems like probably the definition of a stalemate, because the Israelis, they did a lot of damage. Don't get me wrong, a lot of dead, a lot of displaced, a lot of wounded in the Gaza Strip. But strategically, their goals haven't been
Have not
accomplished at
been met.
all. No, no, they set back
No.
Hezbollah, they set back Syria, but ultimately Hamas is still in control of the Gaza Strip, and I know that's part of the agreement. They'll disarm and they'll accept the Oslo Accords 2.0 or whatever. What they won't. But at the end of the day, the Israelis lost up to now these figures are from South Front, I believe 2,000 military casualties, which for a country of 8 million people, 9 million people, that's a higher
That's
number.
a lot.
And that's, I think, upwards of almost 10,000 with some sort of wounded as well. So, and that might be a little bit of a high estimate because South Front, I mean, it's not a terrible source, but it obviously has its biases. And
Right. I've heard by late August from different sources, not South Front, 900 dead, confirmed dead.
that's more realistic, which even still for a nation of that size, for that kind of military operation, is still pretty high as well. And it was a very costly war, and for both sides, neither side really accomplished anything. And it did, I think, the most important thing that happened, regardless of any narrative or public support, because the majority of the world has soured on Israel, even many in the West have soured on Israel. It showed that Israel, as in a military sense, is vulnerable. Look at the 12-day war with Iran. The Iranians were able to land strike after strike. Even the Houthis landed several strikes, have landed dozens of strikes within Israel. They have hit ministry buildings. They have hit military targets. They have come close to hitting air bases. The Iranians did successfully hit air bases. The Iranians demonstrated back in April 2024, although it was a quote unquote symbolic attack, that they had the ability to launch precision strikes against Israel. We saw this summer they did launch precision strikes against Israel. So, and I include this as part of the wider conflict, and this is probably the next phase they're gearing up for, it is to quote unquote cut the head off the snake. But it showed that Israel is vulnerable. The myth of the IDF being this powerhouse military that could take on any threat in the world was shattered when Hamas is still in control of the Gaza Strip. And how many bodies do you lose on the Israeli side to take an inch of land? These are questions that need to be answered. We're probably never going to get the official numbers on this unless somebody ends up leaking them. But and that's not even to say anything of like what the Palestinians, what the Gazans went through, because I think that speaks for itself. But speaking from the
Yeah.
Israeli side, it's you committed to this total civilizational, and even if you ask some people in Israel, apocalyptic war, and this is the end result. And you even look at the map of like the phase with how far Israel was into Gaza. Yes, they did incur into it. They did have them up on the ropes, so to speak. But you figured for such overwhelming military force, they would be able to have finished this war, seize control of the Gaza Strip, and enforce their will. They did not, because the Gazans, um, whatever one thinks of the conflict, fought very effectively, even under constant carpet bombing, even under these horrific, just completely unfavorable conditions, were able to mount a successful counterinsurgency. To return to Kissinger, in many ways, it's the role of the insurgents is not to lose, and I think
Yeah.
that while this is far from over and that the ceasefire is not going to hold, that I think the Israelis especially are committed to seeing this through, and the Gazans, for obvious reasons, are also committed to seeing this through. Uh, at the end, if we're to assume this is the end of the conflict, ideally, I would love this to be the end of the conflict, return to status quo antebellum, which I don't. Once again, I don't think it's going to. The Israeli lost by virtue of not accomplishing their goals. The Palestinians won by holding on to what's left of their territory.
Yeah. But also, I mean, there was allegedly a number of intelligence failures in the IDF as well. They were managed to the Palestinians managed to Hamas managed to ambush them in certain tactics, and they say that there was a number of intelligence leaks. So like this whole like very funny like small screen television spy show narrative of Mossad being like these, super agents. That's like Hollywood bullshit.
Oh,
That's
of
they're like
course.
any other intelligence officer, yeah. Um, but it is there's a lot of competing narratives. One of them that you find in the more like pro-Israel, um, like neoconservative media, like Ben Shapiro types, is that well, this is evidence that Israel actually didn't try to commit. I don't know how much I could say on YouTube, but like,
Uh,
if they didn't try to, you know,
uh,
let's say for YouTube's sake, rid the land of the Palestinians, that they held back and that they didn't uh, commit a lot of savagery, blah blah blah. That it's like they're showing this incredible restraint in the face of terrorism that is so evil, like demonically Hitlerian and evil. And but then you look at the reality of a lot of the damage that was done to, in particular, the civilian population of Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's not that the Israelis were holding back, but like you were saying, it's just the material reality of fighting such a conflict with a small nation. It's not like the sort of invoking the mythos of like say the Yom Kippur War, where they could easily clean up any one of their enemies, and they have this supreme resolve and this incredible intelligence capacity and this tectonic efficiency, and it's just no, it's just
And
that
because
they
they have
have a lot
America.
of yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Israel couldn't survive for a few months without America,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
just no hope for it without America. There's no Israel without America.
I
Israel
remember
exists
someone on
because
Twitter
America
got
exists.
really mad at me for pointing that out.
Who got
They're like,
mad at you?
no, actually, like they have their own industries and they have their own military
Oh,
capacity, and it's like,
what a load of bullshit.
yes, and
yeah,
Estonia
yeah.
can take on the might of the Russians on their own. The three Mosin Nagants in their arsenal, that makes Putler quake in his boots.
It's everybody knows this. How can people? I mean, I get it. Like for a lot of right wingers in America, it's an embarrassment because it's become such a Jew cuck nation. But that's what it is. Like, just be honest. Like, I don't like it. You guys don't like it. It is what it is.
No, but I
But
think,
to try
but yeah, go ahead, TSP. Yeah.
but to try to create this other narrative, like, oh, like, I mean, where does Israel produce? How much arms can Israel produce? How much billions of dollars were sent to Israel and arms to carry out the genocide there?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just them, of course. Britain, France, Germany, all of them gave weapons. They recognized Palestine, but they also gave them weapons.
No, but that's what I mean. Like even Mark Carney here did that. Like it's a symbolic gesture. It's to, it's sort of like a morality car wash, because these Western elites, and that's these non-American Western elites, they realize what's going on. They realize it's a genocide, so they have to sort of placate a lot of their populations, a lot of their migrant populations from the Islamic world in particular, who are causing massive amounts of social unrest. I mean, you see all the protests in Toronto and Vancouver, all the protests in London, in the UK, and in France and Paris. And so it's a way of like wiping their hands of what they were doing, but the arms shipments continue because there's no way of breaking that sort of like Western liberal consensus that Israel is a part of the Western world and therefore it's just business as usual.
And
And but I think the Trump administration, they're sort of getting tired of that, and I think a lot of them are realizing that, well, you really can't do anything to appease Bibi Netanyahu, and to freeze the conflict would be the best policy. And the sort of optics failure of the whole thing is just intolerable, even for the most ardent, even if the most ardent neocon, but certainly, like, say, the manga faithful, a lot of them are very growing skeptical of their role in this whole thing, and they're like,
Israel
well, this is
fatigue.
unsustainable. Yeah, Israel fatigue. Like, this is terribly unsustainable for a variety of reasons. And I
I,
think that's why Trump keeps over and over and over again forcing a ceasefire, but it being violated by Israel. And
I,
this
Yeah,
trend, I
Israel
think,
has
will
always
probably continue.
violated them. So,
Yeah,
but you know what I find interesting? So it turns out that Tony Blair might have been instrumental
yeah,
in creating this peace deal
the
because
Dark Lord.
apparently, yeah, the Dark Lord. So apparently, he had already spoken with several uh, American politicians, and including some in Trump's administration, before he went to personally meet with Trump. And it's mostly his idea, for him to become, if you will, a viceroy of Gaza,
The
right?
Lawrence of Arabia of Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Notice how he's happy for Trump to take all the credit. He doesn't care. Like, he really is. I mean, Tony Blair is really on another level. This mendacious Machiavellian figure. Um,
Perfidious Albion incarnate.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But he really, I mean, he's probably, of course, he works for Ellison, you know, part of the the American Jewish mafia. Um,
There was a certain Armenian commentator
so
with some
that
very
should
interesting
tell you
takes
something.
on Ellison this week.
Yeah, I mean but that should tell you something. Like, he essentially, Tony Blair essentially, his boss, or because Ellison contributes so much to Tony Blair's fund or whatever charity he's running, his NGO. I forget the name of it, but it also throws into doubt this idea that Israel killed Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't believe it.
the
That's
the
kind
the
of
the,
a
the
stretch.
yeah, I mean, the story of, like, the whole story, according to Kash Patel, of how this, young shitlib, who
With a trans
murdered
girlfriend.
with the trans girlfriend. Like, he
Ugh.
dismantles the gun, he puts it in. Like, there's something absolutely fishy about that. It makes no sense. The letter, the 19th century British novelist inspired letter to his trans
I
girlfriend.
did it
My
for
love,
you, my love.
my love. Are you for real? This is so. I mean, who's writing this stuff? The Pentagon has to get, like,
This is intern work at the intelligence agencies. This is like your first day at the CIA,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
FBI
No,
or
but
whatever is cranking this out.
no, but I think,
Re-
like, to push back though, a little bit. I know AA was talking about this when it happened, a month ago or whenever. It was already been a month since Charlie Kirk was
Today,
assassinated.
the recording date is
Today's one
October
month.
10th. Yeah.
Wow. No, to push back a little bit, I do think that if you are an American kid growing up in, like, the heartland or the Midwest or the Southwest or the Appalachians, you do have a working knowledge of firearms, and you probably could make that pretty simple shot. So I think, like, people that are outside of America, I mean, this, Constantine, as an American. Like, I think, like, I mean, his father was a cop, and so he probably knew his way around what he was using.
Let me just say
Um,
this from personal
yeah,
experience. I have no intention nor desire to commit any crimes, but I have in the past been a pretty avid range shooter. And
yeah.
I'm out of practice, it's been several years. But after a little bit of practice and just dedication to it, it's pretty easy to start to nail those kind of targets at that distance. And it doesn't take
Yeah,
any.
professional would have hit him in the head or the heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, it's like he had, I think it was like a Mauser rifle, like
Yeah.
like an 1898 carbine. That might not have been the one, but I know it was like some grandfather's war trophy or something that he used. Some like 5-round bolt action rifle where those things, yes, they're long, they're heavy, but they're accurate.
the trans
Yes.
girlfriend was asking, "Why did you do it?" And oh, sorry, why would you do it? And he's like, "I couldn't tolerate his hate much longer. I couldn't
I also love
tolerate his
the
hate." That was
I, I
fucking.
also love the part where he entraps the tranny boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it is, by
Yeah.
saying, remember when we discussed this?
Like there was this prolific trans poster on Twitter, Liv Agar, who's like, "See, this chaser, this evil chaser, trying to like condemn the trans girlfriend." It's like, you don't hate chasers enough, like trying to LARP like a leftist version of Warren McIntyre. Like, you don't hate chasers enough. It's like, who the fuck are you talking about? That letter was like, there was like one instance of trying to like entrap the trans girlfriend, but
Of
like,
course.
yeah,
Why would Republicans do this?
I don't know. It's no, but like that letter to me read as if this person was trying to like exonerate
Yes.
his bussy girlfriend.
Lover.
I don't know. Like, it's just, yeah, her. It's just, you know, like, what Top Shelf. I think that was like a Howling Mutant tweet. What Top Shelf Bussy does to a motherfucker. Like, it's, oh god. No, but I think like but to your, so what were you, why do we bring up Charlie Kirk's assassination when Israel or
Oh, because I mean, if look, even before Tony Blair visited Trump
yeah,
uh, to sell this plan to him, he already has nearly 100 employees ready to be deployed for for this. So it's been worked out. The idea that Ellison wouldn't know anything about this, I guess what I'm saying is it represents a kind of winding down at the war, right? Uh, because Israel lost soft power. Israel has lost soft power. So all that talk about, Charlie Kirk, and I'm aware of these latest text messages or
Candace
messages.
Owens. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of them, but the last interview that he did with Ben Shapiro, he's playing basically the devil's advocate. Like, he lost one of the funders who, last time gave him $2 million. I get it. I get it, but like, he's upset about losing funding. Like, okay, I mean, if you really believe in this, then you can't be upset about losing funding. So which is it? I guess what I'm saying is maybe not all the people who were funding him were happy with what he was doing, but Ellison is also one of the guys who was funding him. And as it turns out, around this time, just before he got shot and just after, he'd already, Tony Blair and him had already discussed this plan of Tony's to stop the war, at least momentarily, right? To help Israel save face because it has lost face. I mean, you go on Instagram, you have like Jews on
Leftoid
vacation.
teenagers.
You have Jews on vacation in Japan, in Bangkok, and people like with Palestinian flags harassing them or telling them to get the hell out of their restaurant in Vietnam, like all over the place. Right? They're like not they're being really careful about going to some places in Europe, definitely Spain. But they go to Asia and they're being mocked and ridiculed there and told to get out of their premises, get out of this hotel, get out of my restaurant. Like you go on Instagram, you'll see a ton of this stuff. So it, I guess what I'm saying is I'm repeating myself. I think that the plans like this didn't just drop a week ago, right? The plans for this were ongoing. It doesn't mean that I think Charlie Kirk was insincere. When he was on the Patrick Ben David show and said like, yeah, they're going to genocide them. Yeah, that sounds bad, but like if Charlie Kirk can't say that, then you're not going to have the non-Jewish portion of the population of America on your side. He has to be allowed to have some criticism of Israel, or you will lose everything. And it
But
does.
why would they
And
take him out though? Like,
that's just
there's
it. I don't think they did.
no,
I
that's what I
don't
mean. I
think
don't
they.
either. I think that there's way more effective anti-Israel voices on the political left that the Mossad would want to harass or,
Frankly,
do. Yeah,
Well, how
I
about Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson?
yeah.
yeah,
Well, what about like Hassan Piker or all these like academics that protest and
honestly,
these
Marjorie
campus
Taylor Greene,
protest people?
like she's
Yeah.
been
Yeah,
off
she's
the
been pretty
rails
good
as
on it.
far as Congress is concerned, and that would send a message certainly of an elected
Did you see what
official.
Matt Gaetz said recently? Not to
Oh
defend
yeah,
Matt
yeah,
Gaetz, but like,
that
yeah,
was that
yeah,
was wild.
that was
Matt
fucking crazy.
Gaetz.
Like Matt Gaetz, yeah.
Yeah. I saw that.
No, but that's what I mean. Like, I think that a lot of it could be a face saving operation within the conservative movement in America, and I think that I mean, if you were a Jewish person in America, a lot of them are very, very sad by the situation. A lot of them genuinely feel that this is a terrible thing. A lot of them skew progressive, and a lot of them
Especially the
feel
young
like
ones.
they have, especially the young ones, yeah. And a lot of them have they have a sense of culpability. And I think that even the conservative ones who skew younger, maybe they are not as sort of like bleeding heart or pro-Palestinian, but they certainly feel that in the long run, this is a terrible condemnation of their aims. And so I think a lot of them are starting to allow more of a slackening of the narrative to be like, if you are a right winger or conservative in America, then you can come out and and criticize them. And I think that certainly Trump is invested in a particular image of himself as a peacemaker. And
Vice
1,000
it's
Nobel
I
President.
think
Prizes.
yeah, and I think that it's also Trump's ego. The fact that he's like, okay, we're gonna work out a deal, it's gonna work this time, but then it never works, and then BB just like fucking spits in his face. Like, I think that also drives Trump the man to be like, okay, these people have like pissed on my leg and called it raining, and it's not gonna work. And I think as time goes on, there's certain people in Trump's administration who are, younger and know that like this is bad optics. And so the only hopeful thing that you could really do is like, well, they can't challenge, the Lakudniks directly. They can't really challenge them to the point where America would break off support for Israel if they violated their ceasefire. But what they can do is they could sort of like keep throwing certain mucks in the gears of their geopolitical and religious aims, and to say that, okay, enough's enough. It's been 2 years. You've redacted how many
I was
hundred
just going to
thousand
say,
pages
it's
are
been
redacted.
2 years of this.
Yes, yeah,
It's
yeah.
televised. I mean, people see it all the time.
It's not like in 2002, where like on internet forums, people that were
Yeah.
savvy, they could see what's happening with the second Intifada. No, I mean it's people can see it on fucking TikTok and Instagram reels and on Twitter. They could see like children being beheaded and you know relief refugee camp tents being bombed, and yeah.
Well,
Yeah. They have no moral authority.
No, exactly. Yeah,
They've lost it all. Like, I'm sorry, but you can't be part of the West. If you behave this way, you can't be part of the West. Plus, it's an enormous contradiction. You're supporting Ukraine because Russia is just as bad as Hamas.
hmm
Like, Russia doesn't behave like Israel. I mean, just compare how many children have died in Ukraine because of Russian bombs to like it's no comparison. Everybody sees this. It's a huge contradiction, and it's isolated the West even more. Uh, Not that they'll give up in what they're trying to do. This is just this is just a stopgap method for the moment, right?
right.
well, I think that
Until
the elephant in the room on this is the fact that they sweeten the pot probably with a very enticing offer of you cool off on the Palestine issue, we'll take care of Iran. That's
Mm.
Yeah,
certainly one of
yeah.
the
That
bargains that has
I'm
been made.
glad you brought that up. Yeah, yeah.
Where
Now, speaking of Iran, both Russian Ilyushin jets as well as Chinese planes have been landing in Iran in anticipation of an Israeli attack. Israel could be just like, okay, we're gonna attack Iran again, right? Because that was the whole point, right? There's a theory that Netanyahu told Trump that he was going to nuke Iran, and so Trump, being the peace president, said, "I'm going to use the busters. Don't do this." I mean, talk about a country that's just such a liability for the West. Anyways, that's why he was so adamant. Like, no, no, we took care of it. It's all done. It's all done. Like, that seemed to be the messaging coming out of Trump and his administration. That we just totaled them worse than what we did to the Houthis. Meanwhile, the Houthis are still launching missiles into Israel. Um, but
I like to believe
yeah,
that they
what's the?
kayfabed it so they could just appease Bibi. Like Trump called up Iran, the Ayatollah
Oh, I
groups, and
agree.
we're gonna fire some missiles, but get your people out. Nobody's gonna get hurt. And fire the missiles at this base, at this location. No one's gonna get hurt. And we're just gonna, you know, we're gonna tell the Knesset we bombed each other, and it's all good. And the Iranians are like, okay, yeah, okay, Donald, we're gonna do this. It's gonna be cool. But they didn't anticipate the resolve of Netanyahu. I don't think they. It's like
Yeah, yeah.
every fucking time Trump is like, okay, we're friends, and this time it's gonna work, but it never works.
Well, I
And the
mean,
ceasefire,
Netanyahu's
I
been
don't think it's going to work.
no.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that Netanyahu in Hebrew for Israeli television has been saying things like, "We have to move to an Arctic economy. We have to be self-sufficient." I guess that's why they want this greater Israel project, but they're still very far from achieving that.
Well,
Very far.
another thing too, me and Zoomer Schopenhauer talked about this, about the ecological unsustainability of a lot of this Israeli technology to convert, seawater and electricity. They don't have they have a lot of high tech industries, but they have a lot of very niche and very energy intensive industries that just by any physical sort of Malthusian means of the environment cannot be sustainable, and they rely on a lot of
Hmm.
foreign export imports to basically hedge their technological industries. And so I think another thing too is that in the future, um a lot of Israel is not very sustainable in that location to have their sort of like very first world levels of comfort and so on and so forth, and all of their drug fueled trance dance parties. And so I think like and of course the demographic issues that Israel faces, like a lot of other nations in the West and outside of the West. And I think that um any government that comes after the reign of the Likud party is going to have to contend with their massive loss of soft power and their face upon the world, their demographic issues from within, and a lot of the um, industrial and ecological issues that they have as well.
you know what
And
this
I
all
think
sounds
bombing
like to
Iran
me?
would be what?
The curse of the eighth decade.
Oh,
Yeah,
fuck.
three more years.
3 more years.
Oh my god. Um, no, but I think that there could be an opportunity. I could see this happening where you have like a more progressive Zionist government that would come in after Netanyahu, that would probably act more technocratically and try to sort of look inwards. But I think that would require a sort of like recognition or reckoning with the fact that if they continue on the course that they are, given a lot of the ideological sensibilities of people in America not being invested in the sort of historical narratives of of Israel and so on and so forth. I think that any smart government in Israel would have to reconcile with the fact that they can't rely on America forever for obvious reasons,
Mhm.
and I think that they also have to contend with a lot of their populations not identifying with the central government, whether it be the Orthodox or whether it be Russian Jews, and I think that the IDF has a lot of problems, arms production, so on and so forth. And I don't think, like, here's the thing, I don't think that this sort of like narrative that Israel's going to disappear anytime soon. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, Israel as a state is not going to disappear overnight. But I think that contending with being lowered into another nation among many is something that technocrats within Israel are going to have to contend with, and people in the diaspora in America and the Western world. I think that they are more willing to divest themselves of the ideological aims of Israel. I mean, especially the progressive younger ones. They
Uh,
have no investment whatsoever in the sort of uh, the 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 face or the facing of the on the world stage of Israel. So I think it's a very contentious issue, and I think that I certainly do feel to an extent. I do have I do feel for a lot of Jewish people in the West. I mean, a lot of them are terrible shit libs as well, but like whatever, who cares? But I do have it's got to be very tough for them as well. I mean, obviously, it does not. Their discomfort is not as great as the terrible atrocities that have befallen the Palestinians. Obviously, I'm not saying that, but I do have a certain feeling for them. It must be a very terrible position to be in, and I think that a lot of them are wanting any way of getting out of such a moral quandary. And I think that's why a lot of the a lot of pro-Palestinian people are of Jewish descent for obvious reasons. And I do have a feeling towards them, even if they are libtards or whatever. But yeah, it's it's a terrible position to be in. It's the whole thing is fucking terrible, inside and outside. And
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
they have a moral quandary, but that's all they have.
yeah.
It's a first world problem.
Well, it's not like being a Palestinian, obviously. Yeah.
I mean, in many ways, these people their entire lives help build part of the post World War II Jewish narrative that in no small way helped Israel sustain these as much as they're against what they're doing to Palestinians. Don't get me wrong. It's helped sustain Israel narratively speaking, to do the kind of things that they've been doing to the Palestinians for 80 years. So,
Mhm.
and more. But so yeah, I mean, I do think, because of this, it's why I suspected that Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mata, but mostly Blumenthal, was very adamant. It was okay. He was adamant about the possibility, not the definitive uh, proof or uh, uh, yeah, proof that it was Israel that killed Charlie Kirk. But he was very adamant about how Israel could very well have killed Charlie Kirk, and here's why. I think that was on their part as Jews, like wanting to stop this war because it's not good for them, and by assigning Israel as the culprit for the assassination of Charlie Kirk, um, is effective. It's an effective narrative point, right? Well, they assassinated Palestinian negotiators. They, even the ones that are not military, they assassinated Iranian officials in Syria before Assad fell. On and on and on. Why wouldn't they assassinate Charlie Kirk for beginning to have doubts about Israel, right? So I do think, like, in that scenario, like, Blumenthal is careful never to say that, yes, absolutely, Israel did this. I'm convinced of it. What he'll say is there's many good reasons to believe Israel was the culprit, right?
Yeah, he'll
And
equivocate it. Yeah.
he jumped at he jumped on that right, like, on the day of, and especially the day after.
Well,
So
also it deflects from the political left as well, but I don't think that's Blumenthal's, because you gotta realize, like, a lot of leftoids, they fucking hate Aaron Mate and Max
oh yeah,
Blumenthal. Like they think that they're like, I mean, they probably are, but like they think they're like Russia shills, and they're like not real leftists. But at the same time, I mean, I think like them jumping on the Israel thing would be a sort of like long con, like you're saying, to be like, like right wingers in America, or like not even just the political right, but I mean like, conservatives in America, they killed your golden boy, and so why you're supporting them? Which I mean is
yes.
not like a half bad strategy, but like at the end of the day,
No,
it's
it's
kind
not
of
a half bad
absurd.
strategy. I remember the Sunday after Charlie Kirk was killed. I remember talking with some of the younger people after liturgy in the church, and I remember saying to them, I said, Israel is probably not responsible, but they'll get blamed for it. But who cares?
Yeah, I remember you said that last year.
um, yeah, but a lot of those younger people absolutely loathe Israel, and these people are not. Uh, these people are converts, or they are or they're Orthodox, but from, well, some of them obviously are from the Middle East, right?
Yeah,
So like there are two liturgies. One of them is in English, and that one has all kinds of people who've converted. They're not even Slavic. They're just converts. Uh, so there's like Iranians, Vietnamese, Koreans, Chinese, as well as what I suspect are Lebanese, Palestinians, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. They may not be those last two. They just, to me, appear Middle Eastern, but I can't say, because I don't know them that well, that they are from that particular region, right? But they are Orthodox, and they're probably cradle Orthodox. They were baptized when they were children, when they were babies. But the other ones, who are converts, they absolutely loathe Israel, loathe it.
oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's completely unlike being in, like, in an American Zio church.
Well, even like in American, like formerly pro-Zionist churches, a lot of the younger people, I mean, they might not get into an argument with their boomer relatives over it, but a lot of them even are cold on
softening
Israel,
on
to
it.
say
Yeah,
the least.
it's where maybe they're not like dedicated anti-Zionist, but it's a secondary issue at most. Uh,
But you know who's gonna save the American right
me.
Who?
uh,
Who?
for, for Israel? You know who's gonna save us? Brylan Hollyhan. That's who's gonna save us.
I have to
Yes.
say, his name is written like an AI tried to write somebody's name in an image where it just kind of jarbles the letters together.
The ultimate Uggs wearing pumpkin spice white girl named Brylan Hollyhan.
Yeah.
Wait,
I
hold
love
on,
it. I
guys.
love
My dog is here. Where's the shock collar?
it.
No, I would not shock you. Don't calm down. She's very happy right
I
now.
wonder
Don't
if
worry,
people didn't
guys.
they haven't remixed the Mike Pence memes for Hassan Piker yet.
Oh,
I'm disappointed.
that's some pioneer territory. But with the obligatory reference out of the way, back to Israel, of course. One thing.
Well, did you know that Hassan expertly detected that his dog was an Israeli Mossad agent, and so
It'll
that's why he
happen.
had to do it.
Hey, are you a Mossad agent? No, she's SBU. That's not acceptable either.
I think that whole
Oh my god!
fallout between him and Klein is
Oh, that
so
was epic.
hilarious.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow. Oh wow, that was that was
No, they
that
keep
was
going
ju-
after each other. Like, yeah, that was like a huge boon for Ethan Klein. Like, it's just and then they tried to go after his family and like the whole thing with ICOX and I watched too much Kino Casino to really go into it here, but like
aim
that,
on emanations. Have you seen it?
yes, yeah, I think I have,
Oh,
yeah.
oh God, that was hilarious.
I can't believe it, but Ethan Klein like has been stacking W after W this past year. I mean, it's just I mean, he has the most stupid. He has like the stupidest enemies in the world. That's probably why.
I don't know. I think Klein looks stupid. I think he looks
Yeah, they're
like
all stupid. Yeah,
he started to sound more and more like a paranoid Jewish supremacist.
yeah.
Because like if you
Yeah,
watch that animation by Aeon, like it's all the things he actually said. It's not AI. The cartoon is, of course, but not the
yeah.
not the voice, not the voiceover. They're all splices of what he said, and he's talking about how like all along Hassan was this radical terrorist or terrorist supporting friend of his. Is he coming after me?
I don't know, dude. He sounds kind of like Hitler. Does he not sound like Hitler?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's funny though because I think like Ethan Klein, he has a very like can like I don't know. He's obviously like they're all fucking grifters. They all deserve each other. They're all pieces of shit.
Right, right,
All every one
absolutely.
of them. Because you know there was this one debate. I saw this in the casino. There was this one debate between Ethan Klein before they like couldn't speak to each other. There was this debate that happened a few months ago during the summer between Ethan Klein and Hassan Piker. And Ethan Klein, like Hassan immediately like talked about, Palestine and the genocide in Israel. And Ethan Klein, in spite of his like Zionist stance, he like admitted readily to everything Hassan Piker was saying because he wanted to focus on Hassan Piker, the nephew, being aligned with these other like hideous e-drama Twitch
Mm.
streamers like Denims and Frogan who are like calling CPS on Ethan Klein's and Gila. And so he's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's true. The Israelis are genociding them. Let's talk about Frogan calling what do they call in America? CPS. We call it facts here. Let's focus on that. Them calling CPS on me and Gila. And it's funny, like he'll like just he hates Hassan. They hate each other so much that they're like willing to like undermine their own principles just to talk about like e-drama bullshit. It was very funny. Where like Ethan Klein's like, yep, you know what? They are committing a genocide, but who cares about that? Let's talk about fucking Frogan and Denims. And it's just like,
That's right. I'm Jewish. Like we can't. Let's not talk about this. I'm Jewish.
so Hassan Piker's like, did you admit they're committing a genocide? He goes, yeah, they are. They are. Don't worry, they are. It's evil. It's terrible.
Can we
Let's
talk
talk
about
about
something
Frogan.
more important?
Well, I
Yeah,
was
I know it's not more
I appreciate
important.
I do appreciate the tangents, but unfortunately we are at like 2 hours 45 minutes, so I wanted to close with
Mhm.
European news and talk about this government crisis in France, among other small stories of let's just say political dysfunction in Europe. And uh, what is this? The shortest coalition in history? I know that it was complete gridlock. That the prime minister, I don't even remember what one they're on right now. But he was actually called back to form another government. But all the nitty gritty aside, the $1 million question is Macron. Does he stay? Does he resign?
Mm.
I want to hear it from both of you guys because I have my take.
He'll cling on to power for dear life. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Uh,
I have to agree.
I think he would resign under one condition,
He's like a cockroach in that
and
sense.
he is. But I think if he were guaranteed some Brussels job, maybe even Ursula's job, because there were murmurs of sending her to Germany to run for president there. I think if they could entice him with a high level Brussels job, he would leave for it. Or maybe he'll wait out till the end of the term, Perhaps it could be 2027. They move him to that, but I think that's the ultimate aim there, and perhaps if there's some sort of deal struck where he can fail upwards, I could see him resigning.
Well, I think that a lot of, I mean, I don't know if he believes it himself, but certainly a lot of his fanboys. Um, like you'll have like these like Globe Twitter people,
Ugh.
and they'll they have like handles like Catboy for Macron, he, him,
Uh,
Globe in the bio.
I know the type. Ukraine
Yeah,
flag,
you know the
Taiwan
type.
flag, Israel flag sometimes.
Yes, yes, yeah. They'll have like the Ukraine flag, the Taiwan flag, the Israeli flag, the French flag, and they'll have the globe, and they'll have like he, him, Catboy for Macron, whatever. Um, so they really think that they want a blue Caesar, to quote my friend Apex. They want a blue Empire Caesar. They want a sort of European Eurozone, like progressive neoliberal strongman, if that even makes fucking sense.
Yeah,
And
we're
Macron
gonna
to them,
Photoshop some 20th century German propaganda to make it about the EU.
yeah, yeah, but it'll be like femboys for Macron, but they'll have like spinny wheels behind Macron with the laser eyes, like that.
Gay marriage
They
is non-negotiable.
exactly. Gay marriage in Botswana is non-negotiable. So, in a way, like for Macron to take van der Leyen's position, I think would be this crystallization of the mimetic space of Macron representing this like blue Caesar strongman, the way that Gavin Newsom in America represents a blue Caesar to them,
Yeah.
where it's
Mm.
like the sort of middle-aged but not too middle-aged, competent white man who's also like a terminal shit lib, but also worries about the economy and line going up. And I think Macron really does fit the bill in ways that fucking Mers or Keir Starmer simply does not, because their charisma sucks. Um, and so I think that him ascending to an EU position, like you were saying, Constantine, that could be the move here. But I do think that he'll cling on to power in France. I mean, obviously, he feels like he is the only one to steer the ship, to prevent the right wing from ever coming into power, and for France to even deport one migrant. So,
How
yeah.
about a more realistic question? Will he call a parliamentary election again?
Um, Maybe. I'm not well versed enough in French politics, but I mean, it seems to be the trend here. What do you think, GSP?
I mean, I think your take is perfect.
Mm.
Who are they? Who are they going to who's the replacement? Who's
Nobody.
going
They
to
have
replace?
nobody. They fucking have that communist. I mean, even like okay, even on the right in France, that woman. What's your uh? Well, fuck. I'm having a
Le
huge brain
Pen.
fart. Le Pen, Marine Le Pen. Like, come on. I mean, think maybe Zemmour had a chance, but Zemmour was like too eccentric for even French politics. And then you have like other far right people that I think have been like total like people that flirt with the French Nouveau Droit. They're like also totally marginalized from the political process. But on the left, you have like a bunch of like bureaucrats and functionaries. You got that one communist guy. They have nobody. They really don't. I mean, do they have a Macron light? I don't know. But yes, sorry, I cut you off, GSP.
No, no, no. I don't have much more to add. I mean, if he's gone, it will be a big deal.
It's
Um,
chaos. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'd love to see it. It was just,
Yeah. Maybe
I,
the Gilles Jeans will come back. You never know, right? Like it's yeah. But no, but I think like Macron definitely has positioned himself as the face of French politics and society. And for him to leave would be ugh, I don't even want to think about it. I hate Macron, but like I mean in terms of French stability. But then you never know. Maybe that's what they need. It seems that the French always flourish under political instability. Um, but I mean, Macron being swooned as the strongman of all of the EU would definitely that would be his cementing of his legacy. And that would be a very hard thing to pass up, even if it means
Mm.
plunging France itself into chaos. Because you have to realize that Macron, the way that these Globe Twitter Catboy they them Catboy from Macron type of posters, they think that Macron is this nationalistic figure, but he's fighting for this like greater transnational progressive world. That's fucking bullshit. I'm sorry I'm swearing. I want to keep this high IQ, but here's your here's your here's your IQ supplement. Okay, Macron does not represent this like nationalistic impulse. He's not a Napoleonic figure. He has the aesthetics of one,
He's a
but he
Jupiterian
will.
figure, okay? He's the Jupiterian
Yes, he's
president. I will hear no
Jupiterian.
slander.
Exactly. He's an Apollonian Jupiterian type of figure. But no, but the reality is that he is not a quote unquote French nationalist to where he would be willing to sacrifice this like greater globalist project for the betterment and stability of France. Because
Well,
him
I mean,
leaving, yeah, it's just
yeah,
wouldn't
I
work.
was just gonna say. So a lot of people, talk about like, let's say, uh, Trump's first term, all this talk about he's going to pull America out of NATO. This is so ridiculous because NATO's an American project, right?
Well, don't
Yeah,
worry, Spain's getting kicked out.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Um, okay, the number one thing that America exports are American dollars. Okay, and it exports something like over 7 trillion, 3.9 trillion go to Europe, and 3.6 of the 3.9 return back to the US. Does that sound to you like a country that is going to leave Europe in the short or medium term? No. Or they're going to dissolve NATO? No. They're not. Moreover, and we said it on previous programs, I think what has changed is, um, European elites are putting their money in, and initially it was led by the British, but putting them into these offshore banks in the Caribbean and in other U.S. banks, and not so much in Switzerland. And so part of the reason they're going along with whether it's Trump or Biden has to do with where their investments are. So I don't see any big change coming that way. Now, what will happen to France? Well, I mean, I think they're politically captured as much as a country can be. So, Macron leaving, which is a possibility. Who's he going to be replaced by? Even if he is, how will he or she be radically different in this regard, right?
Well, either way, he's out
Uh,
in 18 months. He's term limited.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So, we'll see. I think who was that? There was Mélenchon, but is he popular enough? I don't know.
he's
And
popular among like radical students and like
Yeah,
immigrants, but that's about it. Yeah.
he can be
yeah.
brought in line, but he does have some of the, let's just say, more unacceptable leftist views as far as the establishment is concerned, particularly on some foreign policy issues. Like I said, that can be easily rectified, but otherwise, yeah, no. But in terms of European politics and stability, we do have both Orban and Vucic under siege. And what I think is particularly interesting about Vucic is his retraction about his comments he made regarding Turkish drones going to Kosovo, where he said there was a threat. Turkey's encroaching too much in the Balkans. He got the call. He started backpedaling and apologizing profusely that he would ever insult the Sultan. So that
Hmm.
to be expected of a man like him. They are starting to mobilize the support against Orban and putting pressure on the energy industry in anticipation of the 2026 elections. Uh, as far as other European news, we already discussed Merz and Macron, unpopular as ever. I think uh, Starmer is like sitting at a 13% approval rating, something that is dragging the gutter, to be sure. And just the
But yet he
looming
has a majority, though. That's the problem.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is the problem. And even if Starmer goes, Labor is still probably going to serve out its full term. I doubt a snap election is going to be called in the next 4 years here. I could be wrong, but I personally don't see it. And then, as we discussed earlier at the show, to bring it full circle, the potential energy crisis in Europe vis-a-vis Ukraine. How much of the energy resources of Europe, particularly the eastern frontier, are going to be rerouted to Ukraine, and how much of that is going to be tolerated by the local population? At this point, it doesn't look like there's anyone really comfortably in power in Europe at all. Now, some are in a better position than others, but political stability is not to be found on the continent. Ironically, one of the stronger coalitions is in Italy, which is a country that has traditionally been mired in parliamentary politics and has had an average government lasting 18 months. We're on to 3 years of Maloney's coalition. Think what you will of her. I don't have much positive to say at this point. But nowhere on the continent is there really anything that screams leadership or political stability among the major nations or among the minor nations. Now, sure, you can point to individual figures who are pursuing the correct agenda, but even in that case, they are besieged by both internal and external forces. And it does make you wonder what's the economy of Europe going to look like by 2030, especially if they are to pursue this policy of confrontation with Russia as a whole. And I know I feel like I'm beating a dead horse because I brought this up since
Mhm.
before the start of the war here, but Europe is running around, in my opinion, like a chicken with its head cut off, and even Washington, which has no problem issuing direct orders to it. Yeah, as you guys were saying, Trump isn't going to pull out of Europe or anything, but there also seems to be expressed disinterest of micromanaging the affairs of Europe in Washington in absence of its own leadership class. Not that I'm not saying that I want it to be that way, but I'm saying that you have no leadership from Brussels, you have no leadership from Washington. What is to become of the continent? Like, what are we supposed to make of this situation? Is it just going to be a free for all at a certain point? Are we going to see?
Mass political unrest.
Uh, One would think. I thought it would have come already, but perhaps I
Well,
overestimate the situation.
no, I think that it won't come unless there's dire economic circumstances, because I think a lot of Western European elites, they've sort of laid the groundwork in their oppressive approach towards speech and expression. Now, a lot of, like, for example, the UK under Starmer, a lot of it is, arresting people over their opinion on the trans thing or immigration. But I think a huge part of that is I mean, a lot of these are progressive elites that believe in the supremacy of their secularized globalist morality. But a lot of it is because it's sort of priming the population for greater repressions in the face of economic and political uncertainty. When people would, for example, the protests in the UK over for example, what happened with 3 little girls. I mean, those were curbed very easily with the nanny state lawfare, and. But in the future, it would be very hard to really suppress populations who not only have, there's a certain degree that, like, ideology and politics can get you so far when it comes to unrest. But when your actual existential uh, mode of being, you as a society, is being threatened economically, when you can no longer put food on your table, that is when you can no longer easily curb mass
Yeah.
demonstrations. And I think that a lot of these EU bureaucrats, they're anticipating something like that in the absence of American leadership. Now, I mean, maybe a lot of them could hold their nose for 3 years and, pray to God, or, well, they don't believe in God, but, like, pray to,
Pray
pray
to
as they
Reddit.
might, like, yeah, pray to Reddit that, like, Gavin Newsom will become the king, the blue Caesar of America, and, like, restore this, like, pan-European progressive coalition. But that's going to be a long 3 years if that ever happens. Now, I mean, the Democrats probably do have a good chance in 3 years, but who knows what's going to happen? I mean, if Trump performs, pretty stellar for the next 3 years, I think that if he doesn't get crushed in the midterms next year, I think that this whole they're going to put in Gavin Newsom and Obamacare world's coming back. I don't think I think there's a good possibility of that, but I don't think that would immediately translate into the EU elites regaining the legitimacy that they once possessed 20 or 30 years ago. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not in Europe. I don't claim to speak for Europeans. I know people in Europe that really feel it, but feel like there's nothing that they can do. There's a sense of hypernormalization when it comes to liberal managerial politics, but it's going to be a very tough road for Europe either way you cut it. And I don't think that. But then you never know. I mean, in times of great uncertainty, who knows if there would be maybe millennial or even younger millennial to Zoomer counter elites in the next 10, 15 years that are way more politically radical than the current crop. You never know what's going to happen in that situation. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way for Europe to change course. I mean, it would have to have a monumental shift, and Russia would have to be integrated.
Yeah.
Not integrated in the way that America would like to integrate it, right? By balkanizing it. The problem is most elites now understand are on board. Like, you can find headlines from major Western publications, like let's say The Guardian. America's dragging us to war in Ukraine. Okay, from 2014. Right? That kind of truth just doesn't exist anymore. So most of the elites, the difference between them and maybe someone like Merkel is they accept that America has destroyed any integration with Russia, with present Russia. And their only hope is that Russia's defeated and balkanized and integrated. Like, again, the same thing. Napoleon wants to go into Russia. There's reasons why he wants to do that. East-West integration. With Hitler, it's even more so, because now you're really in the modern world. Think cars. Huge metropolises that need heating, and trains, and et cetera, right? So this is just another way of how you integrate Russia, but not on Russian people's terms. And that's where most of them are, right? I guess you can put it this way: as long as it's in America, there cannot be even the whiff of a Europe that's somehow integrated with Russia, because what they enjoyed was the best economic years of the post World War II world. And America effectively ended that for Europeans. And that's why Britain has applied for an IMF loan. Britain, IMF loan. Think about that.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, as labor is at the most unpopular point, the political repression has kicked into overdrive. And I mean, the fact that they're even willing to arrest leftoids who don't agree with the trans thing, like Graham Linden, who's this obnoxious shit lib, but he is skeptical on one thing, which is the trans obsession. It's man, that's fucking 5 police officers to arrest some pudgy writer who wrote what did he write? Father Brown in the IT room. He wrote the IT room. Did he write? No, he didn't write. It was the same actors, but he didn't write Nathan Barley, because Nathan Barley truly, objectively, is one of the best limited series TV shows that the UK ever produced. But anyways, that's my only. Me and Prude covered it on a DA
Mm.
many moons ago. No, but like, yeah, like the fact that they're willing to do that is just, I think like that is really. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, the typical like right wing take, I think, is partially correct about like, yes, they're doing it for political reasons. They hate their own population. They're doing it to repress the chuds. But there's also a deeper reason of they know that political dissent is going to cook and boil in the coming years. They know that the 2030s are going to be a very contentious time. And so they better do it now and get people used to the idea that there's no such thing as like, free expression or being publicly counter to the political narrative of the elites. And so might as well do it now than later. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it's because of the boomers as well, the boomer liberals. Um, I think Americans, they don't like, they sort of like bat an eye at this. I mean, a lot of Americans are skeptical of the boomers, but the thing is, in America, you do have a lot of like boomers who voted for Trump, who are like in the heartland, who are not like as willing to throw their children and grandchildren under the bus. But in places like Canada and Western Europe, these are like they embody truly all of the stereotypes of like the boomer liberal that really has led to a lot of the problems that you find. And I think that as their grasp on power is as strong as it was 20 or 30 years ago, even as they're sort of like going by the wayside in terms of demographically. Um, yeah, I mean, the only response they really have, besides actually making a better society for their population, besides doing things like addressing the migrant crisis, um, the only thing they really have is political repression at this point, and that's about it. And so I don't want to say like, but at the same time, like I don't want to say like Europe is done, Germany is done, Britain is done, it's over. Fucking Radio Genoa, Ian Miles Chong on Twitter, your UK is done because these
Sir,
people will turn it
Europe is
never be.
finished, sir.
No, but I think that in the future there probably will be a lot of radicalized younger millennials and Zoomers that will be willing to wrestle power away from the elites. And I think that, there always will be a spirit in these people, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of reckoning with their position towards both America and Russia and even China. I think that, I mean, who knows what, I mean, I don't know how China would respond, how China would fit into all of this, but certainly, I mean, um, it's much easier to predict where things are going to go. Not easier, but it's there's more of a there's less ambiguity when it comes to a geopolitical analysis between America and China than there is between China and the EU. That seems to me at least an open-ended question. But I mean, you never know. I mean, in the future, when the boomers go away, who knows what's going to happen? There could be a time of great potentiality there for people in Europe and even in North America. Um, we just have to see. But I mean, who knows? I mean, things might be able to heal. I mean, we just saw Nick Fuentes go on the Red Scare podcast, Nature's Healing. Maybe you never know. I
Uh,
don't know where I was going with that joke,
no,
but who knows?
I mean, we're certainly inbound for very, let's just say, monumental times, and that I think the era of nothing ever happening, if it has not already ended, it is coming to an end, and that the very
Yeah,
glacial things that have been building are finally coming to a head, and they're coming to a head all at once. And uh, to predict Europe's future is really anyone's guess. I think if they can avoid a cataclysmic war with Russia, avoid a world war, that they are in a much better demographic position. They're much more able to reverse some of the, let's just say, recent shifts than the North American countries are. And also, as you said, the question of America and Russia and how that is going to be approached in the future, and even the question of how China is going to be approached in the future. Those are all the determining factors. And I don't know, maybe our little thought experiment on the re-Islamification of the Middle East and of the wider Muslim world is also going to play a role in this. And if you do, let's just say, for example, get a war between Muslim states and Russia, that could change everything, really. That could garner a lot more sympathy for, say, the Russians among the European continent, especially among the more right wing elements. And there, there's a lot of factors at play, and making any definitive predictions on that far of a scale is something I'm not going to do at this point. But for now, the continent drifts seemingly rudderless, and it. I would say it's really
Yeah,
anyone's for
because
the
their
taking.
elites all sold down. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
that's all
Yeah.
it comes down
That's
to. Yeah.
without question. That decades ago, and
These are
it's
And
strange days for you,
America
me,
is
and
squeezing them, they're
Germany.
pinching them because America isn't even economically where it used to be in terms of trade. So it's squeezing them,
time to
right?
liquidate the
It,
assets.
it, it yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
know, when times are tough, you have to go. You have to first extract money from those you don't fear are going to retaliate, and usually those are your allies. So
Well, I suppose closing comments. If either of you have anything to close out the show, I know Gio, you probably have some project or something you'd like to share.
Oh, well, I have several ongoing projects, but yeah, subscribe to the Patreon or Substack.
Give this man your
Uh,
money.
I I uh I recently came out with an article on cultural speciation between people, and I got to fit a lot of music references into it. It was pretty good, but I don't know. These are strange days for you, me, and Germany. These are strange days we find ourselves in. To quote Death in June, um, but uh, it is. It's strange days to. It's funny because I remember before I think they packed it in. It was funny because like when they were touring, Douglas P. He would like change the lyrics. He'd be like, "These are strange days for you, me in America. These are strange days for you, me in Canada." He like kept changing. I thought that was pretty good. I thought that was pretty wholesome. You know. So no, yeah. I mean, my brain's kind of frying,
I
but
mean, yeah, we've been on for just over 3 hours, which I think is
yeah.
um,
There's just I think the problem
oh,
is that
GSP. What have you done?
yeah.
well, these are just my final words that I
Uh,
have to say. This is sort of the direction that things are going in North America.
let me get this up right here.
This is just so good. I mean, it's like talk about conditioning.
You know, I this is really the vibe shift they told us that would come out of Trump, guys, right? Uh,
I love it. The Pajit, right? And then like the mixed race white guy, the angel trying to help them get along.
yeah,
You're going to be rulers of the empire. We just want you to get along. It's so sad.
We
yeah.
didn't even talk about this fucking the Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Yeah,
Oh yeah, maybe come back soon. Like we should.
yeah.
I've watched a few reviews of it. I haven't seen the movie yet. Have you?
I haven't seen it, but I've watched some reviews. It's all people could talk about. But
Yeah, I do like him as a director.
yeah, I think Magnolia. I mean, I was
I
actually paid to review Magnolia. I have to review it soon.
yeah, I remember really liking that film. Also, there will be blood, but also The Master. Weirdly enough, I think that's my favorite of his. So
The
he
Master's
is a
a
good director.
yeah, he is a good director. It's just that he's got like this one's like Hollywood brain. No, The
Yeah,
Master is like one of the best films ever because, of course, Philip
it's a
Seymour
strange
Hoffman's
film
one of
even for him.
yeah, yeah. His range really made that film. Like
Yeah.
that, like even just like that one scene where the chick's jerking him off, like it's or like he finds the split saber book in the desert. Like it's for those who don't know, The Master is
Leave it to
essentially about
Geo.
Scientology. Yeah, yeah. Um, no, but Philip Seymour Hoffman, truly one of the greats, one of the
Yeah.
last greats of Hollywood, just died way too soon. And yeah, no, but Magnolia is, I think, another a brilliant masterpiece that really, I think it was almost 20 years ahead of its time in terms of like discourse films. But I'll save that for the review.
Oh, I remember this guy. Oh, I remember this guy.
He's like beating the American.
He's the Japanese Nazi. Remember him? I remember he did a cast. He did a cast. Remember there was a guy that this is back like the alt right 1.0 to 2016 2017. He was a young handsome guy. He had a mustache, and he would like literally just go, he would stand next to Pelosi and say Heil Hitler. um just really crazy stuff. And I remember him interviewing. Now he fled to Japan. I forget his name. He's famous for knocking off um what's his name, the guy that always wears the beanie.
Tim
um
Pool.
Tim Pool. He's famous for knocking off Tim Pool's beanie at a park during a protest or something. I forget this guy's name, but anyways, uh, I've almost completely forgotten about this Japanese, but I remember him. Yeah, yeah, the Japanese Nazi guy. Yeah,
Why
very.
why is the American flag over a picture of Kim Jong Un? Is it because like North Korea is a puppet of America to this? I don't understand. Like it's just it's too
It's
this
it's
is too
it's too
abstract.
esoteric for us.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my god.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you once again, and it's like we're almost at 3:20 with this. So, thank you everyone for tuning into another episode of the Warport, and we'll see you
Thank
guys
you.
next time. And
God
goodbye.
bless. Goodbye.